Immortal Cultivation in the Cybernetic Milky Way. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyright or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 1. The tech tree may not be right. Dust filled the sky, and the ground was like a roasting cage. This was an extremely hot grey Gobi desert. The stars above the head emitted a faint blue light, which did not seem to be hot. However, the radiation of the cold light shone on the ground, making the entire land emit a scorching temperature. Nanling lowered his head and rode on a hover bike, driving rapidly on this Gobi desert. He was wearing an old-looking grey artificial leather jumpsuit, which wrapped himself up a little bloatedly, covering his entire head, and wearing a pair of lenses that could block strong radiation light. Don't underestimate this artificial leather that looks faded. Its material can withstand the radiation of the stars above the head, and although the built-in constant temperature system occasionally has problems, it can also allow him to move normally in this outdoor temperature of 70 to 80 degrees. The ancient seal character Wind printed on the chest of this jumpsuit indicates that this is an employee uniform of the Wind Consortium. Nanling lowered his body and sat on the hover bike, all the way to a Gobi ground fissure. He stopped, rolled down from the hover bike, and then pulled the padlock behind the hover bike and fell down to the crack. He was a maintenance worker of the Fen group, and was responsible for regularly inspecting the ground vein markers below the crack. He descended all the way down, his movements were light and skillful, and he was obviously very competent for the current job. As the rope was lowered, Nanling's body was gradually swallowed by the darkness. The crack extended downward, and the rock walls on both sides began to open up. Nanling was rappelling in the empty underground space alone, but suddenly he hummed a song. Brubber. This dark space suddenly started rocking. Nanling swayed his head while rappelling, not minding that his body was swaying in this underground space. The tone-deaf voice hummed this strange tune, and there was actually some charm in it. At this moment, a somewhat irritable voice suddenly came to his ears. That's enough. What did I do wrong that the consortium sent you to talk to me? A woman's voice screamed in Nanling's ear. Nanling didn't care at all. He said, it's almost time. Our terms are all 3 years, right? There are still 5 months to go before the 3-year term is up. The consortium will send someone to replace us then. Now, you'd better shut up, woman. I'll call you when I need you. The woman's voice in his ear also rang angrily. Very good, kid, when you come up in 5 months, I'll beat you up. Nanling didn't care at all and continued to hum his little song. Anyway, he only saw that woman 3 years ago and forgot what she looked like. Now he only remembered what her voice sounded like. However, at this moment, his descending figure stopped abruptly. He looked up and felt the irregular vibration coming from the chain, and he knew what was going on. He said helplessly, okay, it's stuck again. Woman, remember to send me another set of hinges next time. The woman's voice sounded, got it, noisy. Nanling then looked down. The goggles had turned on the night vision function, and soon saw that there was a convex platform at a drop of about 20 meters below. That was also the end of his descent. But now he was stuck in the air and he didn't panic at all. With a little effort from his waist and abdomen, he had already swung to the platform over there. In the air, his swinging force did not move far to the position of the convex platform, because he didn't swim his body fully. But the next moment, there was a strong wind behind him, pushing him quickly towards the direction of the convex platform for a long distance. However, he did not fall directly to the convex platform from a height of 20 meters, but landed on the rock wall above the convex platform. The tool slots on the backs of his hands suddenly popped out of the grappling hooks, and he scraped the rock wall all the way down. After bringing up a large cloud of dust, Nanling let go again and finally landed on the convex platform and stood firmly. It's like he knows King Kong. A voice sounded in Nanling's ear. It's scary every time I see you like this. I guess your wind control technique must be level 3, right? Nanling shrugged and said, who told you to always have problems with the hinges you sent down? I was forced to practice this. The woman said, there's no way. The radiation from OB 7561 is too strong. Although the winch has been treated with radiation protection, it will be exposed to the radiation environment for a long time every time it is used, so its performance cannot be guaranteed. Nanling said, okay, this can't change the fact that the Wind Consortium is reluctant to give good things to a small worker like me. The woman said lightly, but you can get a lot of money every time you work. In these 3 years, your salary is even more than twice my salary. For the sake of money, don't complain. This is a dangerous job that requires patience, so the salary will be much higher than the normal jobs provided by the Wind Consortium. Nanling stopped talking and continued towards the passage in front. This passage was artificially dug, and it was a smooth slope sloping downward. In the early years when there was not much dust, he could even slide all the way down. But now he dared not slide down again. If his work clothes were torn in the process, he would be exposed to radiation when he returned. After walking for about 20 minutes, he came to a small underground space. The rocks here were tight and no longer on the cracks. In the middle of this small stone room, there was a device in operation. Like the Bagua altar, there was a long rod supported by special metal in each of the 8 directions inserted into the ground, and then on the ground there were Bagua patterns and runes that Nanling did not recognize. It looked like a cult altar to him. But this is a formation. In the words of the Fen Consortium, this is a planet Earth marrow extraction A Type 4. What Nanling had to do is also very simple. He took out a sphere with bright white light from his toolbox, and then opened an energy device at the center of the Earth marrow extraction array, took down the other sphere that had dimmed, and installed the new sphere. He did not discard the replaced spheres, but put them back into the toolbox and took them back with him. He would send them back to the woman to continue charging them. In fact, these spheres were spirit energy tanks, used to power the Earth marrow extraction array. When Nanling looked up, he could see that above the center of the extraction array, there was a small bottle of about 200 cc of red jelly churning in the transparent container. That was the Earth marrow. It was extremely valuable in this era. Of course, there were only 72 extraction points in the entire OB 7561 planet, and he was responsible for maintaining 14 of them. And on this vast planet, there were only 5 people doing the same job, plus a woman who provided them with logistical services in the outer orbital space station. After skillfully completing the replacement of the energy core, Nanling only had to come back in 5 months to retrieve the container containing the Earth marrow. He returned to the entrance of the passage outside and looked down at the deep ground crack below. Originally there should have been a lava river passing through here, but now there is nothing. This planet is dying. Even though the surface is very hot because of the radiation of the stars, the underground core has already cooled down. Without the flowing magma, the magnetic field of this planet is also weakening, resulting in the inability to resist the radiation from the stars and solar storms. As a result, the atmosphere of this planet is being stripped away quickly. Of course, this is not important to Nanling. His eyes quickly locked onto the chain at a height of 20 meters, and then, a misty spiritual power diffused from his chest, and then under the control of his will, it attracted the surrounding wind. And he suddenly jumped up, and then there was a strong wind behind him, sweeping him up rapidly into the sky. Wind control technique. This is what Nanling thinks is unreasonable about this era. It is obviously a future interstellar era, but why is the technology tree skewed to the direction of cultivating immortals? Chapter 2. Cultivating immortality through technology. Nanling rode his hoverbike back home quickly in the strong wind and sand. This base is a bunker embedded in the Gobi rock. It looks like an inverted bowl with a conical top. It is to prevent being buried by wind and sand, and also serves as an antenna for external communications. Nanling returned to his home where he had lived for 2.5 years. The gate on the side opened in a flash, and he drove the hoverbike in a bit impatiently, and then quickly lowered the gate. This is the garage. But he did not leave the garage and enter his living area immediately, but quickly took out the simple vacuum cleaner he made and sucked up all the sand and dust that had just been rolled in. He felt that since he had traveled to the future science fiction era, there were some things that should be paid attention to. If he traveled to ancient times, well, personal hygiene should not be sloppy. It took half an hour to clean up the garage, and finally cleaned it up. Nanling took off his work clothes in the cubicle. This old work clothes is quite durable, at least it hasn't been worn out for half a year. You should know that generally speaking, such basic supplies are issued every 3 months, and these are the quotas. But if Nanling can use them sparingly, the unused basic supplies will be converted into Lingzhu points at 50% of the cost and finally credited to his account. No matter how small a mosquito leg is, it is still meat. In addition to being particular about diet and personal hygiene, Nanling is very careful about other aspects. After taking off the one-piece work clothes, Nanling revealed his current appearance. Now he is 17 years old, and his height is close to 1.9 meters. His muscles do not look bloated, but very well proportioned. His face is angular, but because of his sunny and cheerful temperament, he looks very pleasing. This is quite rare. After all, people like him who were mixed in the bottom rarely have this mentality. Nanling returned to his neatly maintained little home. Even if it is only a small room of only 30 square meters, it still has a sense of high-end. He took out a made black metal cup from a dark cabinet and placed it on the small bar. A metal water pipe stretched out and poured half a cup of water into the cup. A layer of white frost quickly formed on the cup, and it was obvious that the water was ice water. Then Nanling stretched out his right hand to cover the mouth of the cup, and a sharp sound of rapid airflow came from the cup under his palm. When he took his hand away again, many bubbles appeared in the water in the cup. Nanling picked up the glass of sparkling water and drank it all. Burpee burped happily. What could be more pleasant than drinking a glass of iced sparkling water when you are sweating all over? If there is, it is probably that this sparkling water is not happy enough. Nanling made up his mind that he must find syrups of various flavors to mix his happy water when he has the chance in the future. This is the key to his ability to remain optimistic after traveling to a strange era for 17 years. Well, that's nonsense. The key is that he feels that his future is full of hope. After drinking a glass of sparkling water, he walked to the other end of the room and pushed the door open, only to see a workshop filled with various instruments and equipment. Here he could maintain communication with the outside world and monitor the 14 nerve marrow extraction arrays he was responsible for. The only pity was that he could not contact the other 4 people on the same planet, and even if he contacted the space station in outer space, he had to record the entire process. This was the Fen Consortium's protection measure for its property. They seemed to be worried that their employees would collude to steal their resources. At this time, Nanling answered the call and said, "Maintenance station no. 4 has completed this routine maintenance work." A moment later, a woman's voice came over. "Very good, I have seen that the self-inspection of the No. 055 extraction A device was successful. I have to say, you are young and quick. The other guys have been dilly-dallying and have only completed about half of the routine maintenance." Nanling couldn't help but reminded, "Hey, woman, don't forget that our conversation is recorded. Aren't you afraid that someone will hear your complaints?" The woman said disapprovingly, "Who would be so boring? It doesn't matter even if someone hears it. After all, these are all facts. Maybe the company will reward you." Nanling decided not to continue chatting on this topic. This woman is obviously a veteran in the Fen Group's subordinate institutions. He doesn't want to play tricks with such a veteran. So he asked, "When will the personal assistance device I ordered be delivered?" The woman complained again, "I didn't expect that you, a little guy, still have great ambitions. You would actually use so much of your savings to order a comprehensive personal assistance device. This price is enough for you to buy a big house at Chunyuan and enjoy it for a while, right?" Nanling said, "I'm so young, I must have some dreams, right?" He didn't get angry because of the woman's teasing words. It was not necessary. He even expressed his attitude very sincerely. The woman was silent for a while. Such a sincere and cheerful boy is always lovable, even if he is tone deaf. So she said, "I checked for you. The things you want will be delivered with the next batch of supplies in 6 days. I will send them down to you in the warehouse at the time." Nanling couldn't help but worry. Warehouse? That will make a lot of noise. Will the auxiliary device be damaged? The woman said unhappily, "Then you think too simply of Fenu technology. The packaging of the auxiliary device itself has enough impact resistance." Nanling was relieved. After confirming the delivery time, he entered the communication, and then checked the normal operation of various instruments in the studio before returning to his room to rest. He ate some indescribable nutritional paste, which was simply a pile of nutrients without any taste or flavor. It's not that Nanling didn't want to apply for some better things. He actually cared about the quality of food and drink. But the problem is that this thing is the only one that is cheap and can meet his cultivation needs. Yes, he is practicing, and he has been practicing very seriously. The 4th level of key refining is the result of his hard work over the years. Ever since he turned 12 and obtained the official identity qualification of the Chunyuan 06 space station, he was given an electronic file for free. Key refining technique. In 5 years, relying on his own perseverance and perhaps a little talent, he practiced to the 4th level of key refining little by little. And because of this, he is full of expectations for his future plans. Although it is said that he traveled to a distant future world, this future full of strong science fiction style is actually a civilization of cultivating immortals. Nanling actually encountered such an unreasonable thing, and of course he was full of confidence. Here it begins, here it comes, cyber cultivation. In fact, I have always wanted to imagine what it would be like when a technological civilization develops to a certain stage and suddenly discovers that there is another possibility, and then I wrote it. Chapter 3: Obtaining the assistive device. 6 days passed quickly, which was not difficult for Nanling. Eating, sleeping, refining ki, training muscles, cleaning, when he didn't have to go out to work, all his activities could be done in his small home. At this time, he supported himself with one hand and did the 300 one-handed push-up. When he was about to change his hand to continue exercising, a buzzer suddenly sounded next to him. Nanling paused for a moment and quickly got up to put on his coat. Here it comes, his round of supplies is come in, and the comprehensive auxiliary instrument he has been waiting for is also coming. With the comprehensive auxiliary instrument, it will also become one of the starting elements for him to become an immortal in this era. Well, it sounds a bit inconsistent, but the immortal road of this era is from the auxiliary instrument for information statistics, the spiritual furnace that contains the majestic spiritual energy outside the body, and the wisdom core that can assist in cultivation and use of spiritual energy. Nanling is now just getting an auxiliary instrument, and there is still 2/3 of the way to go to the 3 major items. But this auxiliary instrument has actually used up all of Nanling's previous savings. Nanling could do nothing about it. No matter what era, if you want to move up from the bottom, you always have to make more efforts. As for why it is the auxiliary instrument, it is because the auxiliary instrument is the real core component. Whether it is the operation of the intelligence core or the spirit furnace, the auxiliary instrument needs to provide data support. If the auxiliary instrument is missing, the other 2 devices will be no different from waste. And with the auxiliary instrument, Nanling can do many things. He hurriedly put on his work clothes, and then went out with the blue star light above his head. Outside this station is a desert that looks not much different from the surrounding area. Nanling looked at the time at this time and heard a woman's voice in his ears. Material delivery preparation, I suggest you clean up the sand and dust on the receiving platform, otherwise don't cry if your precious auxiliary instrument is really broken. Nanling smiled and said, "Don't worry, I won't make such a mistake." As soon as the voice fell, he had already pushed forward with both hands at the same time. At this moment, he suddenly controlled the strong wind around him, and then pressed it to the ground in front of him with stronger wind pressure. The next moment, the ground that was originally covered with sand and stones was cleared by the wind pressure. It was actually a metal base, but the wind and sand here were too strong. If it was not cleaned up in one day, it would be completely covered. Nanling said, "Okay, the landing site has been cleared." The woman's voice sounded, "See, I will pass over your head in 15 seconds, count it yourself." Nanling counted down 12 times in his mind, but did not dare to look up. The light of the star was too lethal. But in the next moment, he saw that the sand and dust that had appeared on the base suddenly floated up briefly, and then suddenly fell down and stuck tightly to the ground. Then a powerful gravitational track fell from the sky, and Nanling heard a piercing scream falling from the sky. Not long after, a square box suddenly appeared in front of him, and it fell above the base in front of him with a circle of sparks. At this time, the base quietly launched an anti-gravity field to slow down the square box that fell straight down from the gravitational track. The box that was originally falling like a meteorite paused in the air, and then it landed heavily on the base with a bang. And did not move again. This seemingly simple and crude release method actually contains extremely high technology. The woman said, "Hurry up, you have 40 seconds to get the things." Nanling didn't need her to say more, and he pounced on it. His work clothes were burned by the high temperature and some smoke was emitted the moment they touched the box, but this is normal. He pulled both hands at the same time on both sides of the box, and pulled out 2 hidden pull rods, and then with a force, he manually unlocked the lid. The first time the lid was opened, he saw a countdown of 32 seconds. This was the time for him to get the things. Then he took out everything in the box without hesitation, and even threw it on the Gobi Desert beside him in a somewhat rude way. When he quickly took all the things, there was still a countdown of 2 seconds, so he immediately took a round spherical packaging box like a treasure and stepped back twice to leave the base area. The next moment, the countdown was reset, and the lid of the box was immediately closed. Then another gravitational track fell from the sky, and the box of materials was also shot into the sky, and the friction of the atmosphere brought up hot sparks. Nanling always felt that the Fen Consortium was really stingy when he saw this. Even the express box for delivering materials had to be made recyclable and reusable. It didn't look like a big shable that controlled such a large Fenu galaxy. He transported all the materials that had just been thrown on the ground back to the garage, but he didn't rush to turn on the auxiliary instrument that he had been waiting for a long time. After all these things have been exposed to the radiation environment, and he has to deradiate them. These materials are basic materials for making oxygen, clean water, nutrient paste and other daily necessities, as well as the spiritual energy core to maintain the operation of the station. They were all regular supplies, except for a box of candy and the spherical packaging box. Candy was a necessity for him to make sparkling sugar water, and it was a reflection of his pursuit of quality of life. As for the spherical packaging box, Nanling restrained his impulse and carefully completed the radiation removal steps. He then excitedly took it back to his small room of only 30 square meters and opened the spherical packaging box. There was still a ball inside. A pitch black metal ball. But the moment he opened the packaging box, a green light band appeared on the metal ball, and then an electronic voice sounded. "Dear customer, this is Fenu Technology providing you with boot guidance. First, please confirm your identity." Nanling didn't know how to proceed. He just asked in front of the sphere. "How to confirm?" As soon as the voice fell, the electronic voice of the sphere had already turned on the scanning device, and a beam of light quickly scanned Nanling's whole body. The customer's identity has been confirmed. This product is a comprehensive auxiliary instrument. Would you like to set your personal preferences now? Nanling thought about it and felt that he had plenty of time anyway, so he said, yes. The electronic voice began to ask, please answer the customer's knowledge mastery level. You can give a vague answer with your academic qualifications. Nanling. ... The opening thunderbolt. He had never studied systematically at all. In a terrible place like Chunyuan 06, it was already amazing that he could raise himself and even find such a decent paying job. As for going to school in Chunyuan 06, sorry, he found that this era is really not as good as his previous era. At least at the time, everyone could go to school. Nanling tragically filled in the knowledge mastery level of illiterate. Then the questions of the auxiliary instrument were finished. It should have had many more questions, but it couldn't ask any more. Personal preference setting is over. Please choose an arm to be placed in the microsurgery chamber so that the official standard comprehensive auxiliary instrument of Fenu Technology can be implanted. The electronic voice fell, and a cavity opened in the middle of the sphere, which was just enough for Nanling to put his wrist in. This is the operating room, and the auxiliary device will be injected directly into his body from his aorta with a nanomechanical structure, and then stay in his left ventricle. To be honest, this is actually a human body transformation operation. Nanling himself is somewhat resistant to this, but in order to better survive in this era, he can only undergo this transformation. I have wanted to write science fiction for a long time, so I will use this book to reward myself. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novel, as there you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 4 Gift Spells. It was hard to describe the feeling when the auxiliary device was injected. Nanling just felt a pain in his wrist, and then some cold liquid was injected into his blood vessels. Then this cold feeling went straight along his blood vessels to his heart, and then spread from his heart to his whole body. This was the initial discomfort, which made him feel that there was a foreign body in his body. Fortunately, after these nanoscale machines were assimilated by his body temperature, he slowly felt no more abnormality. But the next moment, his eyes suddenly went black. He was suddenly blind. Even though he had learned about the various reactions after the injection of the auxiliary device in advance, Nanling still felt a little flustered when he suddenly did this. Fortunately, about a minute later, he could see again. But this time, the vision he saw was a little different. A lot of data information was projected on his retina. This information quickly jumped in front of his eyes and he couldn't understand it at all, and some of it covered his normal vision. As his confused emotions were released, these data streams quickly disappeared, and the words body testing appeared in front of him. Nanling felt a little strange, as if he had become a robot. After waiting for about an hour, the self-test was finally completed. Then a row of information appeared in front of the retina. Test results. The user is a resident of Changyuan 06 Immigration Space Station, 17 years old, no education, obvious traces of gene adjustment in the body, tending to fire and wind attributes, 4th level cultivation of key refining. Nanling looked at the string of body information in front of him and felt that except for the first 2 sentences, he could understand, and the following test reports on various hormone levels were completely in the dark. In his previous life, he could understand some blood test reports, but there was one thing that concerned him. Obvious traces of gene adjustment in the body. This puzzled him, because there were only 2 types of people who could accept gene adjustment in this era. Rich children in order to give birth to better offspring. Cheap labor for large companies to manufacture. Nanling thought about his situation and felt that something was wrong. After all, his body's talent was obviously very good, and he actually had a tendency to strengthen both attributes at the same time. These were the results of gene enhancement that those rich children could not buy with money in most cases. But he happened to grow up in an orphanage in the Changyuan 06 space station, an orphan without parents. In an instant, he imagined a story of grudges between wealthy families. What made him laugh and cry was that his retina actually projected a part of his imagination, and directly completed the image for him. The efficiency of this AI image is also unparalleled. Nanling shook his head. Isn't the reaction of this auxiliary instrument too sensitive? Sensing his thoughts, the AI image on the retina disappeared immediately, and a system text appeared. Sensing user needs, the sensitivity of brainwave reading has been lowered. Then Nanling moved his eyes to another place, but saw that a dialog box appeared next to each item to describe these items. This made Nanling feel very fresh, but then he noticed that these descriptions should only belong to the information description in the auxiliary instrument information library, which did not have much meaning at the moment. According to user needs, the item description column has been adjusted to appear when needed. The system text appeared below the horizon again. Nanling saw this state and immediately understood that this was the auxiliary instrument adapting to his own habits and needs. This should take a process. He breathed a sigh of relief. The appearance of the auxiliary instrument brought a great sense of novelty to his life. At the same time, there was a lot of information in the database of the auxiliary instrument. It was a treasure for him, but he didn't know how to dig it out. Not in a hurry for the time being, he opened the candy box in his hand, threw a piece of concentrated fructose into a large bottle, and then filled the large bottle with water. Then he put a finger into the bottle mouth, and the next moment a strong air pressure was injected into the bottle mouth. He was going to make sparkling water again. The sparkling water made in this way is actually filled with nitrogen, and the taste is soft, not the spicy feeling he loves most. But now the conditions are limited, so this is the only way for the time being. However, when he finished making this sparkling water, he was about to take a sip. Another row of system text appeared in front of him. The user can roughly separate nitrogen and oxygen in the air, create and control high-pressure cyclones. After testing, it has reached the LV6 of the wind control technique, and has achieved the conditions for learning basic wind skills. Nanling was stunned for a moment, because the so-called wind control technique is the ability to control one's own wind attribute, which cannot be considered a skill at all. Therefore, he himself has no idea about the level of this wind control technique. The woman above his head said that his wind control technique was LV3, and he was quite happy at the time, because as long as he reached LV2, he could learn basic spells. But now, the auxiliary system directly told him that he had reached LV6. This is not a data casually said by the woman, but the auxiliary instrument accurately analyzed his performance just now. Nanling became excited. Could it be that there are still basic spells in the auxiliary instrument's database? The next moment, 5 basic spells were projected on his retina. The spells are Gaseous Perception, Wind Pressure Technique, Boost Leap, Breath Locking Technique and Air Shield Technique. Only these 5 spells? The auxiliary instrument sensed his doubts and gave an answer. This is the accompanying information for users who purchase Fennu Technology products. If you have other needs, you can purchase and load the information yourself. Nanling realized that this type of information was not given away casually, and it was all paid content. He could only review these 5 basic spells one by one. The first one was Gaseous Perception. From the description, it was a reconnaissance spell. As long as there was airflow, he could sense and warn. However, the sensing range was relatively limited, and it was suitable for use in complex terrain and internal spaces. Then, Wind Pressure Technique was a trick to gather and compress airflow. Nanling already knew these, and mastering these tricks was a natural process. Boosting Leap was to create wind pressure behind him to help him move forward. The difficulty was to control the direction and strength, which was also a natural process. Breath-locking technique was a little interesting. Its principle was to block his own breath so that all the movements on his side would not be transmitted. It was a way of hiding. The last shield technique felt like a combination of wind pressure technique and breath-locking technique. It was a spell that used air pressure for defense. The difficulty was in the control and the intensity of the air pressure. After reading the 5 basic spells, Nanling felt that they were indeed basic spells, and they were really useless. Because whether it was the gaseous perception for reconnaissance, the breath-locking for hiding, or the air shield for defense, he couldn't even find a technological means that could replace them, because the existing technological means can basically exceed the effects of these 3 spells. As for wind pressure and boost leap, they were abilities he had already mastered, and there was no need to learn them extra. Nanling felt that he was at a disadvantage. But after all, they were given away for free, so he decided to practice them well when he had time. But before that, he still had to clean the garage first. Previously, he was thinking about this auxiliary device, and he didn't have time to clean the garage again. He was such a stingy and clean sunny boy. Chapter 5 Huge improvement. Nanling was cleaning, and soon he collapsed from exhaustion. It was nothing special, he just had a sudden idea to use the wind control technique to clean. He tried to control the wind pressure technique and gathered the dust with strong wind. It was successful, but he soon exhausted his accumulated spiritual power and drained himself. Unfortunately, it was too difficult for him to do such a thing with the cultivation level of the 4th level of Ki refining. It was just that the spiritual energy on this desolate planet was thin, and it was too slow for him to practice on his own. Now that he has a comprehensive auxiliary instrument, the next idea is to accumulate spiritual points to prepare for a spiritual power infusion. Although the effect of spiritual power infusion would be much worse without the assistance of the wisdom core, Nanling felt that his top priority was to quickly improve his physical fitness so that he could do more things. Under the current worldview, cultivation is also regarded as a way to transform and strengthen the body, and it is the one with the lowest cost and the highest theoretical limit, so it is very popular in the entire human society. If Nanling can successfully build a foundation, then the types of work he can do will be much more advanced, and he can also be regarded as being able to get out of the bottom. At this time, even the word alarm appeared on the retina. Alarm, the spiritual energy content in the user's body is detected to be lower than the warning value. Please meditate to recover or use recovery items immediately, otherwise it will affect the activity of organ cells. Nanling began to meditate obediently. However, a picture that surprised him appeared on the retinal interface that had previously annoyed him. It was a perspective view of his entire human organs and meridians. Good guy, doesn't this allow him to see inward directly? You must know that normally, to be able to see inward, you must have the 10th level of Ki refining. At the 10th level of Ki refining, all the meridians in the body are opened, and then the spiritual energy flows unimpeded in the meridians and then feeds back to the spiritual consciousness, which can form a state of inward vision. However, now, Nanling has achieved a similar effect of inner vision entirely by relying on the function of the auxiliary instrument. At first, he just felt it was novel, but as this perspective diagram clearly showed him which parts of his organs had hidden injuries and needed more care, which parts were lacking in spiritual energy, or which parts were full of spiritual energy and could be moved to other places, he didn't know if it was an illusion, but he felt that his ability to control spiritual energy had also improved a little. Then he began to slowly adjust his breathing according to the markings on the perspective diagram of the auxiliary instrument, and his physical condition really improved visibly. The spiritual energy recovery speed increased by more than 40% compared to before, and more importantly, after he recovered from 3 hours of meditation, he felt eager to try those meridians that had not yet been opened. What is the difficulty of the Ki refining stage? Naturally, it is the process of opening up the meridians in the body. Before the 4th level of Ki refining, the 12 main meridians are opened, while the 5th to 8th levels of Ki refining are opened up the 8 extraordinary meridians. The 9th level is to open up all the fine meridians in the internal organs, and the 10th level is to open up all the fine meridians on the surface of the body. So far, it is complete. The difficulty of opening up the meridians is how to find the entrance and path of the meridians. This often requires the cultivator to have sufficient perception attributes. Otherwise, after the spiritual energy is continuously accumulated to a certain level, the blurred meridians and acupoints will naturally become clear. Nanling's innate perception attribute should be good, otherwise it would be impossible for him to self-cultivate to the 4th level at the age of 17 in this environment with thin spiritual energy. But it is difficult for him to open up the 8 extraordinary meridians. The reason why the 8 extraordinary meridians are called extraordinary meridians is because the entrance and path of the meridians are difficult to find. Even if there is a complete set of meridian atlas, it will not work. After all, it only roughly points out the direction. If the direction cannot be clarified by the sensor key, then random attempts can only be obsessive. But now, Nanling seems to see the hope of opening the 8 extraordinary meridians in advance. This can be done by using the inner vision function of the auxiliary instrument. At this point, he had to decide that there is really a gap between the children of rich families and the lower class people at the starting point. When the first one starts practicing, there is an auxiliary instrument to assist, so the early progress is naturally rapid. The lower class people still have to accumulate and struggle little by little during the key refining period. How many people can be as determined as him to take risks to make a lot of money, and then bet all their savings on buying an auxiliary instrument? This step, Nanling knew that at least he was on the right track. He stopped and did not break through immediately. Because the auxiliary instrument prompted that his meridians were a little tired, it would be better to rest before practicing. He stopped obediently, just thinking that this auxiliary instrument was too easy to use, right? He stopped refining but did not stop his own practice. He immediately picked up the 2 pieces of iron next to him and did muscle training. Even though he knew that muscle training was the least efficient way to strengthen, he only had this way to train himself now. However, the next moment, his auxiliary instrument brought him another surprise. Even if it was just muscle training, this auxiliary instrument could give him data prompts, allowing him to always maintain the best training efficiency. It can be said that the acquisition of the auxiliary instrument did bring him too much improvement. However, the terrible thing is that these so-called improvements are actually just the starting point for its children. No, only 1/3 of the starting point. Nanling was quite curious, so he asked, "What kind of improvement will it bring to me if I install the intelligence core and the spirit furnace?" The auxiliary instrument replied, "After installing the intelligence core, depending on the model and style, the computing power of this product can be increased by 5-10 times, and it has the functions of LV8 auxiliary casting, automatic cultivation, enhanced scanning operation, auxiliary operation of the spirit furnace, system intrusion, auxiliary design, and enhanced learning." After installing the spirit furnace, according to different models and styles, it can automatically gather spiritual energy at different capacities and attributes for users to use. The spirit furnace is just an external energy source. There is nothing much to say, but the function of the intelligence core is powerful. Logically speaking, the intelligence core is even the basis for controlling the spirit furnace, so Nanling should first get the intelligence core. But the problem is that the intelligence core is powerful and consumes a lot of energy. Unlike the auxiliary instrument, which can rely on the spiritual energy and bioelectricity in its body to supply energy, it must use the spirit furnace to provide operating energy. This seems to be a paradox for Nanling. No matter which one he gets first, it is a waste of resources. This is also the helplessness of the poor. He pondered it carefully, and then thought that since both of them were not cheap, he should continue to save money first. Nanling quickly replanned his future life. In the near future, he would naturally complete the remaining 5 months of his minor career, but during this period, he should continue to improve his cultivation, exercise his spellcasting ability, and most importantly, learn the basic knowledge of this era. The database of the auxiliary instrument contains all the subject knowledge of the basic teaching stage. He cannot give up his current study just because he will load the intelligence core in the future. Speaking of which, the intelligence core is really rigged off. As long as the corresponding knowledge is loaded, it can be called up at any time as needed. It was with this indignant thought that Nanling started to study the content of his basic education. To put it in a more understandable way, he started his career as a primary school student. Chapter 6 Extra Mission 2 months later, Nanling once again rode his hoverbike across the barren Gobi Desert. At this time, he went west and came to a patrol point farthest from his own base. This was a huge meteorite crater. The fallen meteorite undoubtedly shattered the former continental shelf, leaving a gully running through the crater. There was no doubt that Nanling's work location this time was under this gully. Nanling drifted and swung his hoverbike in a chic manner, stopping his hoverbike behind a boulder. Then he did not use the winch hook as before, but jumped directly from the edge of the gully. This move was very shocking. If someone saw it, they would probably think he was playing a suicide game. However, Nanling, who fell straight from the edge of the gully, was not really fallen vertically. He opened his hands and feet slightly, like a swallow gliding in the air, gliding down from the gully. That's right, in these 2 months, he not only opened up 2 extraordinary meridians and reached the 5th level of key refining, but also advanced his wind control technique to level 7. Of course, the improvement of his cultivation level certainly increased his endurance, and the improvement of his wind control skills also improved his control, but these were not the fundamental reasons for his great changes. Facts have proved that Nanling found that he had underestimated the 5 basic spells given to him. He felt that although he could learn these 5 basic spells at a glance, the ideas and directions in them still gave him a lot of inspiration. Just like the lot breath technique and air shield technique, both of which completely control the airflow around the body to form a closed area, and both require gaseous body control, so don't blame him for changing his ideas and transforming the air shield into the shape of a flying wing to glide with a wingsuit. In fact, feeling the oncoming strong wind, Nanling used gaseous perception to distinguish and control the airflow, and the consumption of the whole process was not great at all. He found that he had indeed underestimated these 5 basic spells before. They really gave him a lot of inspiration and taught him how to correctly control the airflow. At least in some delicate control, he was already able to do it handy. Originally, he would have to climb down this ravine with great effort, but now, flying in a wingsuit, he landed directly and accurately at the place he needed to reach. This is a shallow cave, and naturally, the Wind Consortium's earth vein extraction array is arranged inside. Nanling skillfully replaced the energy core of the array, and completed the inspection of other components, and then returned the same way. When coming here, he glided down, and when returning, Nanling used the boost jump. In his eyes, this is a big jump skill, which uses a large wind pressure to push explosively to move a long distance in any direction. The significance of the LV7 wind control technique is that a large part of the spiritual power used for the big jump can be recovered on the spot, and then controlled to perform a second consecutive big jump. In this way, Nanling's consumption of using this skill is greatly reduced, allowing him to turn it into a mobility ability above the norm. He bounced back and forth on both sides of the gully with a big jump, and unexpectedly returned to the top at a speed not much slower than when gliding and landing, and the landing point was stuck at the place where he parked the hover bike with incredible accuracy. Easy, mission accomplished. Nanling said happily after opening the communication, and then got on the motorcycle and prepared to return to his base. This journey was quite time-consuming. If he didn't get back early, he wouldn't be able to learn today's homework. He is still self-studying the primary school curriculum. His current feeling is, the primary school students of this era are really more complicated. In his previous life, he only began to not understand his daughter's homework when she was in the 5th grade. In this life, he found that he might not even be able to pass the 3rd grade threshold. After all, people's basic education has 5 academic years, and the 3rd academic year starts to teach the introduction of quantum physics. It is normal to have learning difficulties. Nanling was worried about his studies when he suddenly received a call from the woman above him. "Kid, I have a temporary task for you." Nanling replied immediately, "Not interested. To work in the Fen group, you only need to do your job well. Any extra work is unwise." The woman replied without hesitation, "It will be counted as one of your attendances and you will be charged extra." Nanling nodded immediately. "Okay, what do you want me to do?" "Well, it's not impossible to have extra work, but you have to pay extra money." The woman said, "About 2,000 kilometers west of your current location is base No. 5. I need you to go to the base to take a look. I'm afraid something happened to Elmu inside." Nanling said in surprise, "You want me to ride a hover bike for 2,000 kilometers? The woman said lightly, "Extra charging means overtime. I'll give you double attendance wages." Nanling hesitated and said, "Okay, the supplies I carry with me now are barely enough to go there, but what about my return trip?" The woman said, "I will pass over base No. 5 inches 2 days, and I will airdrop supplies to you directly then." Nanling sighed and said, "Okay, it looks like this mission will take at least 3 days of my time. I always feel like I'm losing out." The woman said embarrassedly, "Double attendance wages is already my maximum authority, unless there are other developments later." Nanling said, "Don't worry, I will take this task. After all, I'm still short of money." The woman was silent for a moment, but Nanling clearly felt that she seemed to be smiling, as if she had known that he would agree. After a pause, she continued, "Then please leave quickly. I will arrive over Laomu's No. 5 base in 37 hours. Nanling said, "That's more than enough." As he said that, he turned on the power of the hover bike to the maximum, and then shot out like an arrow. The upper speed limit of the hover bike is 580 km per hour, but in this ghost place, turning the speed to 300 km per hour will turn the oncoming wind and sand into bullets. Although the work uniforms of the consortium can resist, what if the clothes are torn? Then Nanling will be directly exposed to radiation. That's fatal. However, Nanling still increased the speed to 400 km per hour at this time, because he activated an air shield for himself. He adjusted the shape of the air shield in front of him and created an excellent aerodynamic structure, so that this air shield can not only resist the wind and sand for him, but also reduce the wind resistance when he is moving and save the energy at the hover bike. Nanling felt more and more that these basic spells were not so useless. He just hadn't thought of how to use them before. At a speed of 400 km per hour and a distance of 2,000 km, Nanling put in all his effort and it took him 5 hours to reach the No. 5 station. The wind and sand here were very strong, and Nanling was a little out of breath, because he had been performing wind escape techniques for 5 hours. Even with the LV7 wind control technique to enhance control and reduce consumption, he was still very tired. When he slowed down in front of the No. 5 station, he breathed a sigh of relief and asked in the communication, "What happened to this old Mew?" The woman said, "His routine maintenance has been delayed for half a month, and all the equipment he is responsible for is in a nearly critical state. I haven't responded to his communication calls for 24 hours. I suspect that he has lost the ability to take care of himself." Nanling had already parked the hover bike and asked, "Is he in the station?" The woman said, "According to the tracking of your work clothes, he has not left the station for 20 days. Nanling nodded, came to the garage of the station and said, "Then, open the door for me." Chapter 7 Conscience Remains. Bang. Nanling opened the door of the No. 5 garaging with some difficulty, which had not been maintained for who knows how long. The right to open the door was provided by the woman above his head. When he opened the garage door, the eyes behind the eye mask were full of disgust, as if he was looking at a pile of garbage. The fact is that the scene in front of him was not much different from a garbage dump. Various parts were thrown all over the floor, and there were also piles of unknown uses. Even the floating engineering vehicle in the middle of the garage was full of things. This floating vehicle seemed to be usable, but it had a shell, which made Nanling look envious. If he had such a floating vehicle, he wouldn't look so hard when he went out to work, right? He struggled to find a passage in this pile of dusty debris and walked inside. At this time, he suddenly woke up and was about to turn on the radiation detector on his work clothes to check the radiation content in this garage. As soon as he had the idea and hadn't made any move, the radiation detector on the forearm of his work clothes had already lit up by itself, and then he didn't even need to look down to see it, and a strong radiation pollution image had already appeared on the projection of his retina. Everything in this carriage was full of radioactive garbage. The auxiliary instrument was powerful and had connected all the equipment he was carrying. Nanling's face showed more disgust, and at the same time he communicated, "I think I know what's wrong with that old Mew." The woman said, "I guess it's radiation sickness." Nanling asked in surprise, "How do you know?" The woman sneered, "Humph, do you think this is the first time these idiots have done this? I looked through the logs in the space station before, and found that there have been 31 accidents caused by radiation sickness in the past 4 construction periods, that is, in 12 years. Nanling had already found the door to the living area, but he didn't push the door directly in, but went to find the radiation removal device. Then he helplessly found that the device was broken. He said, "Well, there is radiation everywhere, and the radiation purification device is broken. I'm afraid I can't rashly open the door to Lao Mew's living area." The woman said, "Do you think he has been working in this environment for a long time, and now he has lost contact? Can the situation get worse? Let's determine his condition first, and then discuss other things." Nanling felt that it was right, mainly because of what she said. If Lao Mew really died because he pushed the door now, it couldn't be blamed on him. Then he pushed the door directly in. As a result, first of all, the radiation mark on the retina did not disappear. This dark space was full of traces of radiation contamination, and its contamination level was not even worse than that in the garage next door. Moreover, the small space of 30 square meters was filled with all kinds of rotten food residues, smelly clothes, and countless bottles and jars. It looked like alcoholic beverages. Nanling dared to bet that Lao Mew had definitely squandered all his salary. He was even a little afraid to step forward, for fear that he would step on something sticky. In comparison, he even felt that the messy garage outside seemed fresh. He did not go in, but gave an order in his mind. Search for humanoid creatures. Then, many analysis wireframes immediately appeared in his field of vision. The auxiliary instrument did not have direct detection capabilities, but it could quickly analyze everything in his sight. Then he immediately found a dirty black palm in a corner full of food packaging. Nanling twisted his brows, looked at that area, and then stood at the door and pushed out a palm towards that place. The next moment, the strong wind pressure blew away the messy food packaging in the corner, revealing the appearance of an old man with a bloated body. The old man looked to be in his 50s or 60s, with a round body, and he looked very decadent. Moreover, he was covered with dirt, oil and food residues, and it seemed that he had not taken a bath for a long time. However, what Nanling was quite concerned about was that his legs were replaced with mechanical prostheses, and one of his arms was also modified with many tool slots. The torso was not modified. After all, torso modification is probably the most expensive. This is the typical image of the lower-class people on the Chenuano 6 space station. They have done a lot of heavy work to make a living, and in the process, they will cause a lot of irreparable pain to their bodies. Then they will replace their bodies with mechanical prostheses. Or simply replace their originally healthy limbs with mechanical prostheses with directional functions in order to engage in some high-paying but high-demand jobs. For the sake of life, they always seem to be particularly difficult. Seeing this, Nanling also let go of some of his disgust in his heart. After a little hesitation, he came up with a good idea. Speaking of it, the air shield technique is a concentrated high-density airflow, and it can be changed by him. Can it be changed into the shape of a hand to grab heavy objects for him? Anyway, he tried it. He stretched out his right palm and waved out a high-density circulation. Nanling found that he couldn't shape it into a hand for a while, so he simply trapped the old Mew in the form of a loop and dragged him out. Because the material of the prosthesis was not high-end, it was very heavy, making it very difficult for Nanling to drag it. But he did not give up and worked very hard. Because his gas perception told him that this person could still breathe. Since he was still alive, he had to try his best to save him. He struggled to drag Lao Mew to the door with high-density gas circulation. Only by observing him closely did he find that Lao Mew's eye sockets were sunken and there were blood stains oozing from the corners of his mouth and ear holes. It was not possible to see what his complexion was like for the time being because he was too dirty. The radiation detector tested the radiation level of this person's body, and it was not surprising that it was seriously exceeded. So he said in the communication, "It's confirmed, it's radiation sickness, how to deal with this?" The woman said, "Look for his anti-radiation injection to see if it's still there." Nanling had the thing himself, a total of 5, which was the most important benefit of this job. These 5 anti-radiation injections can be taken away even if the work here is finished, which can save lives at critical times. As for Lao Mew's anti-radiation injection, Nanling looked around the messy room with a tangled look, and soon the auxiliary instruments helped him find a clue. 3 empty injection bottles, and one had become a small pile of debris. There was another injection that Nanling did not find, but he saw a completely empty injection box. He said, "I'm afraid he doesn't have any extra anti-radiation injections." The woman hesitated and said, "What about yours?" Nanling said, "I still have mine with me." The woman said, "Now you can choose to use your own anti-radiation injection to save him, and I will deduct his corresponding salary and transfer it to your account on the next payday. Or you can let him fend for himself. I will contact the consortium to send someone to clean up, and the work he is responsible for during this term will need to be shared by you and others." The choice of a life was placed in front of Nanling. This old Mew is undoubtedly a bad person, and he may not even care about his own life that much. Saving him, Nanling will neither gain nor lose, just as if he cashed in an anti-radiation injection. If he doesn't save him, he can share Lao Mew's work and make some extra money. The cheerful boy didn't hesitate at all and turned towards his hover bike. He chose to save people. Because although he is still short of money, he lacks time to practice and improve himself. He doesn't have the time to waste on cleaning up Lao Mew's ass, which is not cost-effective for him. Why can't so many people at the bottom of society get out of their own level no matter how hard they struggle? That's because they put all their energy into making money, so they don't have extra time to improve themselves. Nanling understands this truth and naturally knows how to choose. Well, the conscience that still exists in the heart is also an important factor. Chapter 8 Love Money, Fear Trouble. Nanling took out a syringe box from his hoverbike and opened it to reveal 4 syringes. He had already used one before. When he first came, he didn't have such a strong sense of protection, so he accidentally suffered a certain degree of radiation. Although he didn't show any adverse reactions at the time, he still took the initiative to give himself an injection. Now it's time for the second injection. Nanling took out the anti-radiation needle and stabbed it into Lathomu's neck. The cold blue liquid was injected into Lathomu's body, making him shudder all over. At this time, the woman said, "This injection will be enough, but you must find a radiation-free environment to place him within half an hour, otherwise if you still want to save this old thing, you'll have to give him another injection." Nanling immediately stood up and looked around. He was looking for Lathomu's work clothes. He just needed to put on the work clothes for him, which could prevent radiation. But the work clothes he found were really unbearable to look at. The tattered appearance and the size that was obviously one size smaller than Lathomu's made one wonder how much the old man's belly had expanded in 3 months. Nanling said, "Remember to prepare a set of the largest sized work clothes for him and the supplies." Then he began to rummage and pick up things. The woman said, "Okay, we still have 30 hours to prepare these." When the work clothes were no longer available, Nanling began to look around again. Then his eyes suddenly saw the floating engineering vehicle parked in the garage. The car was full of junk, but the car body itself was airtight and there should be radiation purification equipment. He quickly opened the door and climbed up, and then speechlessly saw an empty anti-radiation injection tube left on the co-pilot seat. Was the last one injected here? Nanling had a bad feeling at the time. He quickly turned on the car for monitoring. Obviously, the car was also full of radiation, and it was obvious that the car could not be radiation resistant. He was a little frustrated. In this case, even if he had more medicine, he couldn't help this man carry it. At this moment, his auxiliary instrument came into play again. It began to give him operation prompts and assisted him to start the self-inspection of the engineering vehicle. The test results were quite encouraging, that is, the radiation remover in the engineering vehicle could still be used normally. Is there a leak in the car body? Nanling immediately thought of the key. Then he hurriedly opened the cargo door behind the engineering vehicle and blew out all the messy things in the engineering vehicle with a wind pressure technique. There were a lot of bits and pieces, but he didn't have time to pay attention to them. Then the gas perception was fully turned on to find every corner of the car body for him to find the leak. This was the most efficient way he could think of. After all, he had limited time. After finding the gap, he had to find a way to seal it up. After a while, he quickly found a place. It was in the cockpit, or in other words, at the door next to the main driver. This place had obvious signs of collision deformation, which led to a leak at the door gap. This old mule was really bold. He simply sealed it with tape and continued driving. I have to say that there are a lot of complaints about this car. First of all, how does this old mule drive? The maximum speed of this engineering vehicle is only 300 km per hour, right? How could he crash the car like this? In addition, knowing that there was a leak, he used tape to deal with it perfunctorily. How big of a heart does this have to be? Nanling felt that this old man actually didn't take his life seriously at all, and might be in a die early and be reborn early mentality. He quickly searched through the pile of junk in the garage, and with the help of the auxiliary instrument, he quickly found some materials that could be used to isolate radiation. He also found a welding machine and finally welded the door directly. Well, a simple and crude solution. Then he turned on the radiation purification device. The principle of this device is very immortal. It is a sci-fi display of the cleansing talisman. As the hidden spiritual pivot ran with the rune trajectory of the cleansing talisman, the radiation index in the entire car began to decrease continuously. Nanling saw this and no longer hesitated. He immediately dragged the old mule into the cab and put down the co-pilot's chair for him to lie there. 10 minutes later, the radiation index in the cab of the engineering vehicle quickly dropped to a safe level, and Lathomu's life was saved. After another 10 minutes, the radiation index in the rear compartment also dropped to the standard. Nanling opened the door between the compartment and the cab and walked out of the compartment, then asked in the garage, "It's temporarily settled? When he wakes up, my mission will be completed, right?" He didn't want to stay here at all. When he was looking for something just now, he found the energy core that could replace his hoverdive, which means he could leave now. But the woman said, "Okay, so far, it can be considered as a normal extra attendance, and you will be charged double. But you can also see that this No. 5 station is in a mess now. I need you to check its functions." Nanling asked, "Do you want extra money?" The woman was silent for a while. Nanling laughed and said, "It's my gift." As he said that, he tiptoed through the 30 square meter living area and came to the work area at the other end to check the equipment. The power supply is still there, but many devices have automatically shut down. Obviously, the operating status here is not good. He felt that the biggest problem with this workshop was that it was too dusty. He didn't hesitate at the time and turned on all the gas sensing every airflow in the room, and then pumping it in a circular manner. The dust was brought together to the door, and then he swept it all into the ventilation duct and then discharged it to the outside. The radiation level here is lower, obviously old Mew doesn't come here often. Nanling tried to restart these devices, and these devices were running happily as if they were reborn. That's because the accumulated dust has been cleaned up, and they are not that fragile. The woman communicated. The equipment has been restored, and finally there is no big trouble. Then she said, however, considering that this No. 5 station has been seriously contaminated by radiation, and its own garrison employees are temporarily unable to move, I have a maintenance task for you. I wonder if you are willing to accept it. It's a task, and there are links you points to earn. Nanling's eyes lit up at the time. He asked, maintain the radiation purification device. How much will it cost? The woman said, I have to tell you, if the mission was originally to restore the functions of the entire No. 5 base, you could get 3 times the income of a routine visit. But now if it is just to repair key equipment, I'm afraid you can only get the income of a routine visit, not double that billing. Nanling did not feel any annoyance when he heard this. He asked, what else? I know you must not have finished talking. The woman said, also, if you are commissioned to restore the functions of the entire base, then this is not an amount I can approve unilaterally, and it needs to be reported to the Fengzi Operation Company under the Feng Consortium. Nanling heard it and said immediately, I understand, it's good now. Reporting to the Qi Company means a lot of review procedures, and even his communication conversations with the woman have to be reviewed, which is very annoying. Anyway, Nanling still understands this kind of unspoken rule, and try not to report things that can be arranged privately by everyone, unless it is really impossible to cover it up. It seems that Nanling has lost a lot for this, but we should also see how much convenience he can get with the help of his female colleague. He loves money, but he is more afraid of trouble. Chapter 9. Good deeds without fame. Nanling decided to carry out a simple maintenance task, but the only problem now is that he can't repair it. Seeing that he was so tactful, the woman reminded him, don't forget your auxiliary instrument. I will use the equipment in the No. 5 station to send you the drawings of the radiation purification device. You can use the auxiliary instrument to receive it. It's a pity that you don't have a smart core yet, so you can't receive too much information. Otherwise, I can directly give you a full operation tutorial, and then the smart core can operate it all the way. Nanling felt strange when he heard it. Why does it feel like after having a smart core, human's own brain can be emitted? He downloaded the drawings according to the woman's instructions, and then he could only project them on his retina and figure it out by himself. To be honest, fortunately, this thing is not complicated, and Nanling has already self-taught the basic 3-year course, which is just right for him to understand the drawing structure of this device. So it's sad, has the basic education of elementary school students become so sluggish? After he understood the design drawings through the auxiliary instrument, he was ready to start disassembling. The main engine of the radiation purification device is in this workshop, and the living area and the garage are all used to transmit spiritual power through spiritual lines. He turned on the external unit, and was shocked to find that after the protective external unit was turned on, it was revealed to be in a state of obvious violent destruction. Nanling's expression became serious. Looking at the serious damage to the spiritual structure of the clean clothes spell, he couldn't help asking, will you be fined for intentionally damaging the consortium's equipment? The woman replied, even if you remove all 3 of this old man's prosthetic limbs and sell them for money, you can't pay it back. I just checked his account, and there is no spiritual point on it. This is really courting death. Nanling was speechless, and always felt that the anti-radiation injection was wasted. But no matter what, since he accepted the task, he had to continue the maintenance. This so-called spiritual axis is to make a rune circuit with a spiritual line that has a very strong spiritual power conduction ability, so as to stabilize the structure so that the rune circuit can operate for a long time. For Nanling, he learned the rune circuit of the clean clothes spell, which is actually equivalent to learning this spell. From his point of view, he took the task and got the money, and he could also learn a useful spell, which was really a good deal. The woman also saw the tangled spiritual wires through the monitoring system in the workshop, and said, it seems that this is the only way for now. I will put the new spiritual wires in the material box and send them down together. You can operate it then. Nanling thought about it and had to give up. After all, the spiritual wires were already a tangled mess and obviously could not be used. At this time, he heard a noise outside and quickly got up and walked out. In the cab of the engineering vehicle in the garage, the man named Laomi was knocking hard on the window with the cab, as if trying to break the window. Nanling, still wearing his work clothes, stood outside the car and said calmly through the communication system, "It's useless. Your prosthesis is already in a low-energy operating state. This kind of strength can't break this layer of glass." Old Mew said angrily, "You bastard boy, who asked you to meddle? I'm finished, completely finished, do you know that? I will never let the company's people take all my organs and sell them. I would rather end myself." Nanling asked speechlessly, "Then why did you destroy the spirit of the radiation purification device?" Old Mew's somewhat rude voice said intermittently, "I'm just too angry. It's always broken, always malfunctioning. I was so angry, so I thought about giving it a blow to see if it would get better. As a result, you saw it, I messed up everything." Nanling looked at the breathless old Mew, who looked very weak after just waking up, and felt a little pity. He believed what old Mew said because it made sense. At this time, the woman's voice sounded, "I retrieved the surveillance footage from 20 days ago, and I saw that the old man did indeed dismantle the shell of the radiation purification device, and then he gave it a blow in a rage. The case was solved. It was not difficult at all." Nanling said helplessly, "You are not well yet, you should have a good rest, I will go see if the thing can be repaired." He went back to the studio to think about it. The woman said, "You can't do anything now." Nanling said, "No, I feel like I can do something, and something is wrong." The woman asked curiously, "What?" Nanling adjusted the angle of the surveillance so that the woman could see the radiation purification device he had disassembled, and then said, "Normally, if it is in the energy transmitting state, when this spiritual pivot is disturbed by external forces, the spiritual lines here should be completely burned. But you see, they are just messed up. This shows that when it was destroyed, it was in a state of not being connected to spiritual power." As he spoke, the details of the spiritual line were projected onto Nanling's retina, and the auxiliary instruments helped him sort out the visual information. Then he said, "That old man is quite lucky. The spiritual line is not broken." The woman was silent for a moment, and suddenly said, "Do you still want to help him?" Nanling laughed and said, "No, it's a rare opportunity. I just want to verify what I have learned." As he said that, he began to carefully hold the spiritual line with his own hands and sort it out bit by bit according to the details given by the auxiliary instrument. He tried to adjust it back to the state where the clean clothes talisman could be run. The difficulty of this talisman is more difficult than the basic spells he has mastered, and it is considered to be a primary spell. But he did a good job, after all, he only needed to follow the map. When he recovered, he compared it with the drawing projected on the retina by the auxiliary instrument, and felt that he could hardly see the difference. He said, "Very good, next it's time to check the energy core. Obviously there is a problem with its spiritual power transmission, but I don't know which part is wrong." As he said that, he began to disassemble it carefully. First, he took off the energy core and found that the spiritual power in it was still very abundant. He checked every conducting component one by one, and used his spiritual power to conduct a transmission test. It didn't take long for him to find a problem in one of the tiny cavity components. His spiritual power transmission was blocked. "I found you." This was a very delicate small component, and what was speechless was that this small component was grey and looked like it was filled with dust. His previous cleaning work was obviously not detailed to this extent. For such a delicate small part hidden inside the equipment, it was obviously not something that could be cleaned up by a large-scale cleaning. Nanling blew a breath on the small component, and then with the help of gaseous perception and some small pressure, all the dust inside was brought out. Then he did the same thing, checked all the components, and then installed the radiation purification device back. Buzz with a buzzing sound, Nanling saw that there was no problem with the spiritual silk he had rewoven, and the clean clothes spell worked again, and he felt quite happy. The woman's voice also sounded at the right time. "Congratulations, you finally saved the life of that loser. There is no need to apply for spiritual silk, which means that this is just a simple maintenance task and there is no need to report to the Fengzi operations company." Nanling smiled and said, "Then he is really lucky. I didn't expect that he was so lucky to succeed in one go." The woman seemed to know that he was unwilling to admit her kindness, so she didn't say more about this. Chapter 10. A sharp turn for the worse. A sharp whistle came from the sky, and Nanling waited for this wave of supplies. He found that the things inside were clearly divided, and it was obvious that half were for Lao Mu, and the other half were for himself. There was not much for him, just an energy core that could allow the hoverbike to run back to his own base, and a large bag of fructose syrup of various flavors. Nanling was surprised. But he heard a woman's voice in his ear. "A small reward for you, good boy." Nanling snorted coldly and didn't respond, but still carefully put the fructose in the hoverbike. The rest of the supplies were taken back and placed in Lao Mu's garage. He didn't want to stay in this messy place any longer. "I got your supplies back for you, I'm leaving," he said, and left without paying attention to Lao Mu's calls inside. He rode on the hoverbike, pulled the full horsepower and shot out. He didn't want to deal with that kind of troublesome interpersonal relationships, nor did he want people to think that he was a good person. Because the life experience of more than 10 years has told him that in this era, if he does not have enough strength, he is not qualified to be a good person. This time, the harvest is not bad. Repairing the radiation purification device counts as 1 attendance, rushing to the aid and exploring the problems of the No. 5 base counts as 2 attendances, and the most important thing is that he also obtained the blueprint of the radiation purification device and learned the clean clothes spell. In contrast, the new energy core supply of the hovercraft is a trivial part. When he was still 100 kilometers away from his base, he finally exhausted the energy at the old core and replaced it with a new one. With this energy core, he has an extra backup energy source, and his heart is much more stable. At this time, he asked, "Woman, how is Lao Mu now?" The woman is probably the person who knows him best on this planet, and said, "He has recovered some physical strength, but he is very depressed now." Nanling asked, "Why is that?" The woman said, "Because he thought he was dead this time, so he overdrew his salary in advance, and now he is a pauper with nothing." Pup Nanling couldn't help laughing out loud. This is really an unexpected result. The woman continued, "The good news is that he has given up the idea of suicide because he had a near-death experience and he doesn't have to worry about the company removing his prosthesis." Nanling replied, "I don't care if he wants to commit suicide again. Just work hard and don't bother me again." He thought he answered coldly. Little did he know that this behavior looked so troublesome to the woman above him. She just said "Heavy" and ended the call without saying anything more. After all calls had to be recorded. Nanling returned to his base. He hadn't rested for more than 40 hours and felt quite tired. He took out the bag of raw sugar that the woman had given him, picked out an orange flavor, and immediately couldn't wait to make himself a glass of orange-flavored soda. It was a long-lost taste. Who would have thought that in this era, science and metaphysics are developing, but with the increasingly serious polarization, the material things that the lower class can enjoy are not as good as before. With this orange soda, the hard-to-swallow nutritional paste doesn't taste so bad. 2 months later, Nanling managed to push his key refining stage up 1 more level. The 6th level of key refining, breaking through twice in 4 months, this is the huge improvement brought by the auxiliary instrument. And on this day, he encountered something that made him excited, that is, he finally succeeded in making a carbonated drink. He successfully extracted enough carbon dioxide from his breath, and then pressed it into syrup water, making it a real carbonated drink. This progress greatly improved his happiness. And at this time, he got another prompt from the auxiliary instrument. It is detected that the user can perfectly separate the various gas components in the air, and the wind control technique has reached LV8. LV8 wind control technique, this is the limit that can be achieved with the assistance of the intelligence core, right? Nanling pondered in his heart. To be honest, he only realized the importance of those basic spells now. They gave him many directions to explore the wind attribute ability, which enabled him to improve the wind control technique to this level so quickly. Among them, the spell of gas perception is particularly important. Nanling can be said to be able to sense the subtle differences in gas flow with great detail only because of the principle of this spell. Different types of gas have different densities, so there will naturally be some subtle differences when they flow. Nanling distinguished different gases in this way. Of course, being able to sense such subtle differences, his own talent is definitely not false. This day is the day he will start the last round of maintenance. In fact, each maintenance cycle takes a month, and the work content of this maintenance cycle is to retrieve all the collected earth marrow. This is a very happy moment for Nanling, which means that he will soon be able to return to the Dust Air 06 space station with his harvest and start the next stage of his life plan. He is an impatient and efficient guy. Since he learned to use the air shield technique to resist the wind and sand, he has fallen in love with the feeling of racing in this Gobi desert. Therefore, he can almost clear the goods of the 14 earth marrow extraction points in his jurisdiction within 3 days, and directly complete all his work in advance. The next step is to study while waiting for the Fengzi Operation Company to send a spacecraft for rotation. The only thing that made him not very satisfied was that he had only learned all the knowledge of the 3rd year of the basic education course during this time, and was stuck on the content of the 4th year. This study is really difficult. However, just when he was exhausted from brushing questions and studying the knowledge of the 4th year, he suddenly received a communication from the woman above his head. The looters are attacking my space station. Everyone leave the station immediately and hide, their target is the Earth's marrow. Nanling's scalp tightened when he heard it. Something happened. He made a prompt decision, grabbed his sugar bag and rushed out of the rest area, quickly changed into work clothes, and then stepped on the hovercraft and rushed out. The woman's voice had been interrupted, and at the moment the communication was interrupted, he heard an explosion that stopped abruptly. Is the woman in the space station afraid of being in danger? Nanling looked up at the sky. It was the night of OB 7561. A burning light suddenly appeared in the dark night sky and fell to a distant place. Nanling thought about it, hesitated for a moment, and then suddenly pulled the full speed and rushed over. At the same time, he used the air shield technique to the extreme, perfectly integrated the breathlock technique, so that all the sounds of his hoverbike could not be transmitted. He even changed the air density above his head and refracted the light, making himself enter a semi-invisible mode. This was his biggest improvement in the past 2 months. However, he was not sure whether his concealment ability could be hidden from the detection of the plunderer spacecraft, but he could not care so much now. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novel, as there you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 11. Picking up a brain. Nanling chased the space station in the direction of its fall. He could not stay in his own base anyway. The space station itself also had a certain degree of protection. Since the looters were able to shoot down the space station, they undoubtedly had enough firepower to kill him easily. The best thing for him to do now is to find a place to hide immediately, wait for the looters to leave, and then wait for the company's rescue. With the box of earth marrow he carried, he would definitely be rewarded by the company. At the same time, Nanling noticed something. He saw a small spaceship in the sky heading towards his base. He was very nervous at this time, because since he saw the spaceship, it meant that he must be within the detection range of the other party. He was just betting that the other party had no way to detect him. As for going to fight the other party, that was something he had never thought about. After all, no matter how confident he was, it was just a matter of a cannon on his head. What made him feel relieved was that the other party obviously did not have 2 advanced detectors. If it was a regular army, he would never have such an idea, and he would just surrender and accept his fate. But it was different when the other party was the looters. The looters' spaceships were basically picked up from the garbage dump and assembled by themselves. In order to avoid being tracked by the wind domain law enforcers, they must have some very sensitive detection devices, but the equally poor looters often did not have very comprehensive detection devices. Nanling bet on this point. And fortunately, he won the bet. Or perhaps the heavy radiation on this planet made many of the looters' detection methods ineffective, which was the key to Nanling's comfort at this time. In fact, if there were no special communication equipment at the station, ordinary communication methods would really not be able to avoid the interference of radiation. At this time, his communication was quiet and completely silent. It seemed that the other miners also understood what they should do at this time. But in this process, Nanling suddenly saw another small spaceship flying overhead in the same direction of the space station's fall. He hesitated a little when he saw this, and then immediately drilled to the side, and drilled into a crack in the ground with the hoverbike and the supply box it was carrying. The crack was not too deep, and he glided down to the bottom. Then he took out a camouflage cloth from the supply box and covered his vehicle. After doing all this, he carefully climbed out of the crack and walked towards the direction where the space station fell. He was very careful, fearing that the hovercraft would be too big to expose his body at close range. As for whether this would slow down the rescue, what a joke, that woman fell from such a high place, and it was all blown up. The chance of survival has already dropped to the bottom. Even if she survived by luck, Nanling wanted to help her, but he had to ensure his own safety. Anyway, the first thing he had to do now was to ensure his own safety. When he could see the large burning crash site from a distance, he saw a spaceship in the distance taking off and flying in another direction. Nanling crouched down and waited carefully for a while, making sure there was no more movement, and then walked towards the fallen space station. When the space station fell just now, he was still far away, and only felt the ground shaking a little, and there was a shockwave that had been weakened a lot. Now that he looked closer, he realized how destructive this crash was. A huge impact crater appeared on the entire ground, and a large part of the entire space station had actually disintegrated before the impact, and large areas were all burning debris. Nanling's auxiliary instrument was turned to the limit at this time, and wherever he looked, there were dialog boxes showing the analysis results. He walked quickly through the ruins, not knowing what he was looking for. Or rather, he just wanted to give himself an explanation. After all, after 3 years of getting along, he actually regarded the unknown woman above his head as a friend who could talk to him, even if it was just an explanation to himself. Anyway, there was no one around now, and no matter what he did, only he would know it, and he was not afraid of being laughed at. The auxiliary instrument was very powerful. He spent nearly an hour to finally find a twisted wreckage in the wreckage area that stretched for more than 10 kilometers. Well, a female body that looked completely burned, with her head no longer in the right place, and her limbs twisted and broken, but there was no sign of carbonization, instead there were flashing sparks jumping constantly. This was already a complete prosthesis. There was no head, perhaps because her only head was original, and it would have turned to ashes in such an explosion. The electric sparks kept jumping, and the flames were burning the prosthesis, which made Nanling feel a little heavy, but he also put down some of his worries. Then he immediately turned around and prepared to leave. But the moment he turned around, he suddenly saw the headless mechanical prosthesis shaking suddenly. He was numb at the time. Could it be a corpse? Then he realized that this was a mechanical prosthesis, and he was afraid that it would not be a corpse. When he looked back again, he saw the prosthesis twitched again, and then saw a burst of more rapid sparks jumping, and then it was completely paralyzed. When Nanling was confused, he suddenly heard a muffled voice from the slightly bulging belly of the prosthesis. "Kid, come and help me, I can't get out." Nanling was stunned, and then realized something and hurried forward. It turned out that this woman used her prosthesis as the last protection, and hid her head in the special abdominal cavity of her prosthesis, and finally escaped. However, the bionic skin of this prosthesis is very strong, especially after being burned by high temperature. It has been completely hardened, which is very difficult to deal with. Fortunately, there are claws on Nanling's work clothes that can temporarily act as a sharp weapon, and then he performed a cesarean section on this prosthesis. He cut open the hardened artificial skin of the prosthesis's abdomen, and then took out a head that was already a little burnt on the surface. This burnt state does not look like it can survive. However, something extremely shocking happened. This head, whose facial features could no longer be distinguished due to being burned, actually bounced its skull. Then a brain covered in a glass cover crawled out from a vehicle similar to a giant spider. My goodness, it turns out that the woman that had been floating above his head had only this brain that was original from beginning to end. At this time, the brain spoke. "Damn. I almost became a stewed brain, these damn robbers. Kid, take me with you and run away quickly, we can just hide and wait for rescue." Nanling felt a little disgusted, thinking that the image of this brain really did not conform to his aesthetic taste. As if sensing Nanling's hesitation, the brain shouted again. "Don't be in a daze, wait until we return to Chunyuan 06, I can be your legal advisor. You probably don't know, our work is in short. If we are attacked by robbers, it will be another large sum of money. But Fengzi Operation Company is very shady. If we don't mention it, the insurance will be embezzled by them." Nanling didn't say anything, picked up the brain and ran out. Don't mention money to him, he can't control himself. But after coming to his senses, he suddenly returned to the side of the prosthesis and threw the empty head and the prosthesis whose belly he had cut open into the fire next to him. This is the only way to destroy the traces. I hope those robbers will not think of coming back and will not notice more detailed traces. Chapter 12. Brains should be desires. When will the company's frigate arrive? Nanling asked as he ran towards the hiding place of his hover bike. The female brain said in a nonchalant tone. "I had already sent an alarm message when the space station was attacked, but I suspect that there is a shielding device on the robber ship, so my alarm message may not be sent out." Nanling thought for a moment and said, The space station has been bombed. The operation company should be able to get the news soon, right? The female brain said. Who knows, the internal operations of this company are a mess. I even suspect that the robbers must have got internal information and came to trouble us. Nanling said thoughtfully. Indeed, they went directly to my No. 5 base. They seem to have known the location of the base for a long time. But is this obtained from high-altitude reconnaissance? The female brain said firmly. No, what is there about this OB 7561 that is worth the robbers making such a fuss? Only the earth marrow that is about to be harvested. Because the earth marrow is difficult and time-consuming to collect, the selling price of it in various business groups in the galaxy is not cheap, so these robbers can only come for this. And they arrived at this time, obviously knowing that this batch of earth marrow is about to be harvested. They shot down the space station directly, which means they were sure that there was no earth marrow harvested on the space station at this time. In summary, these looters must have internal information of the company, or at least accurate intelligence on various matters on OB 7561. Nanling understood that there was a traitor. He asked with some uneasiness. If all the earth marrow produced on this planet is taken away by the looters, will the company deduct our salary? The female brain sneered and said. That group of greedy trash will definitely do so, but don't worry, we are all legal residents of Chunyuan 06 and protected by the laws of the Wind Domain Federation. If this matter gets out of hand, the Wind Consortium will definitely expose all the senior executives of that scum company. They dare not make a big deal. Nanling still felt a little uneasy after hearing this. He was never afraid of these things on the surface, but was afraid that the other party would use dark means. The female brain said, are you afraid that they will use that kind of means? In fact, it is very simple to deal with it. As long as we settle in the middle area of Dust Edge 06, then they will have no way. Dust Edge 06 is an important industry of the Fen Consortium. The lower areas where the poor people at the bottom live may not be taken care of, but the middle areas and above have invested enough security forces, and they can't do anything to us. Don't think of those termites as big shots who can cover the sky with one hand. They are actually just dogs raised by the Fen Consortium. Nanling felt a little relieved. It seems that the female brain is a person who is very familiar with the internal rules of the Fenu. With her help, at least his own interests can be guaranteed. As for offending the operation company and not being able to find a job. What a joke, similar companies are everywhere in Dust Edge 06. This the operation company can only recruit people in the lower areas, which is not high-end. And now that he has an auxiliary device, he can indeed move to the middle area to live, where he can also find a better job. Soon he arrived at the hiding place of the hover bike. He placed the female brain on the front of the vehicle, and the spider legs of the brain could naturally fix its position. Then he started the hover bike and drove in the gully for a while. Very cautious, that's good. The female brain praised. We just need to survive for a day. The Fen Consortium has set a 24-hour emergency response time for its subordinate operating companies. No matter what happens, they must send armed forces to the scene within 24 hours, otherwise it will be a serious dereliction of duty. Nanling said nothing, just drove the hover bike to the ground, then changed the gully and continued to move forward. After doing this twice, he came to a very inconspicuous gully. This gully was a bit narrow, at least it was just a thin crack on the surface, and only a certain place was wide enough for the hover bike to barely get in. The female brain raised two tiny cameras that served as eyes and looked at the slit of sky above her head, then nodded with satisfaction and said, it seems that you are also preparing for a rainy day. But it is true that Chunyuan 06 can be as big as you with all arms and legs, so how can the brain not work well? However, her praise was too early, because Nanling soon found another cave in this gully. The location of this cave is very good. Perhaps because of the special geographical relationship, there is little wind and sand pouring in here, not to mention the radiation-filled sunlight. It turned out to be an extremely rare natural low radiation area. There is still some radiation remaining, which is unavoidable. After all, the entire planet is full of radiation. But with this place, even if his work clothes are damaged and he has to face the radiation environment, as long as there are enough supplies, he can survive for more than half a year. When he walked into the cave, he saw that the cave was surrounded by hard metal ores, and there was a supply box welded with lead bars in the cave, which naturally contained some supplies. Seeing this, the female brain was speechless. She said, you are really well prepared. Nanling said, because when I took this job, someone reminded me that this job might face the threat of looters. I was quite scared, so I saved some resources in my daily work. After finding this natural shelter, I put all those resources here. As he said this, he pushed the hover bike into the cave and began to rearrange the shelter. When he arranged it at the beginning, he was just worried and didn't have enough conditions. Now he has the conditions. So he immediately took out a thick blanket from the lead box. If you look closely at this blanket, you can find that it is all made of cloth cut and spliced from the standard work clothes. He made a tent that can block external radiation to a large extent, and then set up the tent in this cave with low radiation. In the tent, he cast the clean clothes spell that he had practiced. The next moment, the original trace of heat in the air also dissipated, at least there was no radiation in the tent space. The female brain asked in amazement, "Where did you learn this spell that can resist radiation?" Nanling was slightly surprised, and then said, "Didn't you teach me?" The female brain was even more confused, and she said, "When did I teach you this?" Nanling said, "Have you forgotten? 2 months ago, when you asked me to repair the radiation purification device, you sent me all the drawings of the device." The female brain asked in a daze. "Then?" Nanling said, "Then, I found that the core of the device is the clean clothes talisman, and I learned it. Otherwise, how do you think I repaired the device?" The female brain stopped talking for a while. Nanling didn't care, but took out his own supplies and put them in the tent to purify the radiation together. He always has to make plans to stick to it for a long time. After a long time, the female brain, which seemed to have crashed, asked, "Don't you have a smart core in advance?" Nanling said, "How is it possible? The smart core needs the energy of the spirit furnace to work, and I can't afford either of these two now." The female brain stopped talking again, but now as a brain, she is very greedy for Nanling's brain. Chapter 13 My roommate is a brain. In the shelter, Nanling and Nono talked a lot. They didn't hide their past, because it was meaningless to the residents of Chinyuan 06. Just by looking at his current state, you can roughly guess what the life of the lower class people is like. Nono's life is a standard model of the poor in the lower class area of Chinyuan 06. Her name is Li, because she has debuted at a young age, so she took the stage name Li Ji. Before the age of 20, she lived by selling her young body and lived a life of luxury for a while. After the age of 20, she suddenly realized that she couldn't go on like this, so she used her relatively young body to save a sum of money and began to learn knowledge that would allow her to complete the rest of her life. After the age of 30, her body had been ruined, but she could already try to find some technical and clerical jobs, and gradually replaced her broken parts. At the age of 46, she only had a brain left, and she almost completely transformed herself into a data life. This year, the brain is 57 years old. He is completely used to the state of the brain and doesn't feel anything wrong. She even said, "Don't look at me like this, but it's much easier to get happiness. As long as you stimulate a specific cortical area, you can go to heaven without any additional organ stimulation. Isn't it convenient?" Nanling was still not used to chatting dirty jokes with a brain, so he was speechless. Of course, he also talked a lot about his past. Since others were so open, he didn't hide his past. Anyway, in his opinion, this is just a story about a low-level boy who awakened early and then climbed up step by step. There are so many low-level people in the whole Chinyuan 06, this story shouldn't be too strange, right? However, to the brain, it sounded like a story of you can do whatever you want if you have talent. It was normal at the beginning, just a story about a precocious boy who was smart and motivated. But the style of painting suddenly turned to another direction when Nanling was 12 years old. He started to refine Ki at the age of 12 and reached the 4th level of Ki refining at the age of 17. This is almost a speed of 1 level per year. Who among the people in the lower level area can do such a thing? It's not that brain is ignorant, but she knows too well how bad the harsh environment in the lower class is for a growing teenager. Who can break out of that environment and improve their class is not a wicked devil. There are really too few teenagers like Nanling who can be clean and honest. Brain chatted for a while and then became a little listless. She said, "My nutrient solution is running out. I will die immediately without the nutrient solution." Nanling looked at the transparent yellow liquid in the small glass jar of brain and asked, "What is this composition?" "I have some basic nutrient solution here, maybe I can mix it." Brain said, "Let me see." Nanling took out the supplies he had put away, and prepared for a rainy day so that he had some of everything here. The brain took a look and breathed a sigh of relief. Although it's not so delicious, it can be used at least. As it said that, the two probes on the mechanical spider looked at Nanling and said, "I have to say that your success is deserved. Being smart enough, cautious enough, and having a sense of crisis, that's enough. But Nanling seemed worried, and he said, "No, that's not enough. The supplies originally stored here and the ones I brought are only enough for one person to last for 3 months. Now it can only last for 2 months. Brain. ... Isn't your sense of crisis too strong?" Nanling said, "I used to be robbed frequently. I had to save money to improve myself, but I couldn't let those people not be able to rob me, otherwise I would soon be a corpse. So I must be prepared to be robbed at any time, and to be able to survive even if I have nothing on the surface." The brain sighed. The lower area of Chinyuano 6 is really training people. But those who robbed you must not have a good end, right? I don't believe that anyone who can walk out of the situation will really be a good man. Nanling laughed when he heard that. He said, "It's nothing. They are just targeted by thieves every once in a while, and then all the good things they have saved up with great difficulty are lost. Lingzhu points are digital currency, which cannot be obtained through robbery, so the robbery and theft at the bottom are actually in the form of barter. But no matter what, Nanling really survived many times by relying on the help of the other party during that period." Brain laughed when he heard that. "I knew that a group of idiots with problems in their brains could not play with you. They robbed you of a little thing, and you turned around and stole their house. I'm afraid that many parts of your auxiliary instrument were provided by those unlucky guys." Nanling smiled but didn't say anything. He couldn't say that casually. After chatting for a while, the two of them took a rest. Brain was easily tired because it was soaked in a not-so-good nutrient solution, while Nanling took the time to meditate and practice to adjust his state. Who knows what the situation will be like above? 1 day later. Nanling and Brain both woke up at the right time. The Brain said, "It's been 24 hours. The company's idiot should have reacted. If the looters really had inside information, they should have retreated." Nanling didn't say anything, but carefully packed up her shelter, and even folded the tent cloth and put it back in the lead box. The Brain asked, "Are you still planning to come back?" Nanling said seriously, "It's better to be prepared. What if the company's frigate doesn't come?" The Brain. ... She had praised Nanling's sense of crisis before, but now she thinks that this sense of crisis is a little too strong, right? Always preparing for the worst, isn't it tiring to live like this? After Nanling finally packed up the shelter, they returned to the hoverboat, and then returned to the ground gully at a low-speed cruise, trying not to make any noise. At this time, it was still night on the surface of the planet. Nanling's hoverbike turned off all the lights and moved silently in the dark wasteland. This serious and cautious attitude made her brain tense, and she suddenly began to analyze. If there is really a traitor in the top management of that scum company, then it is absolutely possible that the frigate will arrive late. But they can't go too far, because the consortium is not a charity, and the White Feather Corps stationed in the Wind region will conduct a global scan of the entire Wind region every 36 hours, and all unregistered ships that do not belong to the Wind region will be photographed. This is another very useful information, worthy of being an old aunt who has been in Chinyuano 6 for so many years." Nanling said. Although the star region to which Chinyuano 6 belongs is at the edge of the Wind region, considering the time of travel, these looters should have left by now. Unless there are other accidents. He was also slightly relieved, but he was not really relieved. The environment of OB 7561 is far from giving him enough sense of security, and it would not be wrong to be more careful. Chapter 14. Crouching on a spaceship. Nanling brought his brain to his No. 4 base. It was quiet here. In fact, it was quiet all the way. Nothing happened. But Nanling always had a bad feeling. Suddenly, he had an idea. The hoverbike circled his base 3 more times, each circle bigger than the last. The Brain didn't understand what Nanling was doing, but she had learned her lesson and didn't ask. Nanling was actually conducting reconnaissance with gaseous perception. He decided to expand the circle twice. If there was no problem, then he would be relieved. However, just when he was about to complete the 3rd circle, the gaseous perception brought him some abnormal information. It was a radio wave noise, which was intermittent and he couldn't perceive it very well. But it was enough to make him alert. He looked around and immediately turned the hoverbike to the distance. He found a hidden place to park it, and then he sneaked out with the Brain. At this time, the Brain knew that Nanling must have discovered something. Her spider vehicle lay on Nanling's shoulder, and then stretched out a spider leg and gently rested it on Nanling's ear. The next moment, Nanling heard the voice of old Aunt Liji. "Are they still here?" Nanling replied, "Not sure, I just found some uncoordinated radio waves. I'm going to go over and take a look. Although it's a waste of time, we have plenty of time before the company's frigate arrives. The biggest problem is that the company's frigate doesn't seem to have arrived yet." Nanling speculated all this with the greatest malice, so he had to be cautious. He walked slowly towards the area where he found the abnormality, and the effects of the lot breath technique and the refraction technique he developed were fully activated, making him seem to evaporate directly in this wasteland. And thanks to the strong radiation environment here, there are many light distortions in the wasteland, which makes his refracting light. The unnatural places are also covered up. Under the cover of strong radiation, he was not discovered. But this is not good news for Nanling. He would rather be busy in vain. In a gully not far from the No. 5 station, a small spaceship covered with a tarpaulin for hiding was lying quietly. The shabby feeling made people worry whether the ship could still fly. The looters, there must be something wrong. The brain immediately put his ear and said, "Quick, let's hide." Nanling shook his head and said, "No, we have to find a way to kill them." Brain. Question mark, question mark, question mark. She didn't understand Nanling's brain circuit anymore. He was so cautious before, why is he so irritable now? Nanling said, "They are waiting for me, and since they can stay and wait for me in such a high-profile manner, it means that the frigate will not arrive in time, at least not before they catch me. I'm not sure how long they can suppress this matter. Considering the worst-case scenario, I must take the initiative to attack, otherwise I will face a dead end." The brain was shocked when he heard it. It turned out that the extreme of caution is recklessness. According to Nanling's analysis of the worst case, the frigate may have been involved in this incident, so in this case, their only chance of survival is. The brain looked at the small spaceship, and the folds of the entire cerebral cortex were electrified at once. She was stunned and said, "Seize the ship, the only way is to seize the ship." "But the question is, why are they holding you so tightly?" Nanling sighed and said, "Have you forgotten that I have already completed the task of recovering the Earth Marrow and am just waiting to get off work?" The voice in her head trembled and said, "Did you take all the Earth Marrow with you?" Nanling said, "Yes, it's in my tubes." The cortex of her brain began to be electrified again, and bubbles began to appear in the nutrient solution she was soaking in, as if it was about to boil the nutrient solution. Then she groaned, "Damn it, we're in danger this time." But danger is also an opportunity. "Are you sure you can seize the ship?" Nanling did not speak. He had already touched the side of the spaceship. Now his only problem was that the looters were hiding in the spaceship and he could not get in. He carefully concealed himself and waited quietly. Until half an hour later, there was a sound of a hovercraft driving rapidly in the distance. His mind suddenly came to its senses. You set an automatic program for that motorcycle, so that it will start automatically after a limited time. Good idea. Now it depends on how these robbers will act. Nanling waited quietly, and after a moment he saw the door of the belly of the spaceship open, and then 3 hovercrafts, each carrying 2 robbers holding guns and weapons, rushed out with strange cries. Fortunately, they are not going to start the spaceship. Nanling muttered, and at the moment when those people left, he noticed that the hatch of the belly of the aircraft was about to rise slowly again. He immediately jumped over with a big jump and jumped in before the hatch closed again. It was obvious that these robbers had a very poor sense of prevention. They did not expect Nanling to use such a simple concealment spell to enter their spaceship. "This is really too bad," Nanling complained. Because the state inside the spaceship reminded him of Laomu's base, how could it be called chaotic? It really made him a little irritated. At this time, the brain reminded, "Be careful of their internal defense system." Nanling looked around and saw a self-propelled energy gun with its head lowered in the hangar. From its state, it was obvious that the energy was not connected. The brain sighed and said, "Well, for the looters, I'm afraid they won't waste resources on that protection system inside the spacecraft. Now, you can do whatever you want." Nanling nodded and walked towards the cockpit of the looters' spacecraft. Then he saw a man sitting with his legs crossed in the driver's seat, seemingly operating various equipment on the spacecraft carelessly. Nanling quietly touched it. However, at this time, he suddenly noticed that there was an operating screen in the cockpit, which shows the monitoring of the hatch. And on that screen, there was his figure. His refraction could not avoid the detection of this monitoring. At the same time, the man turned his head and looked over, and saw Nanling on the screen. He suddenly jumped up from his seat and shouted while pulling out the gun. However, he opened his mouth but no sound came out. Because the air around him had been completely blocked by Nanling, the air would not transmit sound to him. The next moment, Nanling had already rushed up quickly, holding a ball of compressed air in his palm and pressing it against the man's chest. Boom! The man was blown up and jumped before he could react. But the next moment he fell down again. Although there was no sound, the heaviness of his body was obvious at a glance. This is undoubtedly a prosthesis. Nanling didn't expect that his sneak attack, which was ready to go, would not work. He could only sigh at this unfortunate world. In ancient times, this would be a slat that could break monuments and split rocks, but now it can't even move a soldier. Fortunately, Aunt Liji's sneak attack was successful. She was like a spider with a brain, quietly landing behind the man's head, and then one of her spider legs pierced into his neck. The next moment, the man who was hit head-on by the wind pressure technique but was safe and sound fell to the ground without a sound. This was Aunt Liji directly cutting off the power to his prosthesis. Under such circumstances, Nanling always felt that he was no better than a bare head. He began to re-examine his abilities and realized that he should focus on mastering firearms skills, which were much more useful than these spells that had no lethality. But now, no matter what, they had a spaceship. Chapter 15. Escape from the surface. Aunt Liji's brain had already climbed to the main control seat of the spacecraft. This knowledgeable old aunt operated and inserted her spider legs into a socket on the main control seat. After a complex data flow, she completed the control of the spacecraft. She said proudly, "It seems that my 3 years on this desolate planet have not wasted my skills. The invasion was successful. This ship is now ours." Nanling looked at the brain and was very surprised. I didn't expect that Aunt Liji was actually a real technician. Although she could have even stronger data invasion capabilities as long as she had the intelligence core, the brain in front of her obviously completed the invasion with a naked brain. This shows that she has strong computing ability and is talented in this aspect. As if knowing what he was thinking, the mind had said quietly, "Don't think too much, my level is not worth mentioning, at most I can only be a network administrator for those companies and enterprises. As for getting rid of the physical body and becoming a digital life, don't even think about it. Once my computing power is separated from this last support, it will just be a pile of invalid data, unless someone can write a logic program for me." Nanling knew that she was talking about another evolutionary direction of this era, digital life. It's a pity that there are very few people who can really achieve it. But at least there are some thoughts. Unlike the cultivation route that Nanling took, the ultimate goal of Immortal is unknown. According to his understanding in his previous life, the Immortal should start with an immortal spirit that is not stagnant in things, and then destroy the world with a wave of his hand. But the Immortals of this era, won't they be heavy metal style, and can destroy the world with a wave of their hands? Nanling was a little pessimistic, mainly because he had never heard of the existence of a real Immortal, so he didn't know how to have expectations. At this moment, Aunt Liji's mind said, "Sit tight, we're leaving now. I'm afraid the journey will not be peaceful." Nanling also realized this. He quickly fixed himself on the co-pilot. During this process, the Raider's spaceship had already started to operate. Nanling realized the role of a skilled technician, that is, all the equipment of this spaceship was started almost at the same time, and all indexes were used to the extreme. It can be said that all the equipment on this spaceship combined cannot reach Aunt Liji's limit. Nanling felt that even if Aunt Liji's strengthening direction was completely different from his, her brain's thinking ability might be better than his. At this time, the brain said, "Hurry up, I found through their system that although the large spaceship of the looters has temporarily evacuated, there are still 4 other spaceships on this planet. They seem to be very confident that they can find us before the company's escort ships arrive. Your guess is right. Their swaggering stay is enough to explain many problems." Nanling nodded and said, "Then there is no time to lose, set off immediately. The later they react, the greater our chances. It's just that I have to wrong the others. I hope they can be luckier." He was talking about the other 4 miners like him. It's unknown whether they can escape this disaster. In fact, they were dragged down by Nanling. After all, if he hadn't taken away all the earth marrow he was responsible for, causing the looters not to get what they wanted, these dangerous guys would not risk staying on this planet. The spaceship started. Then it took off in the sky with a sonic boom, and took off directly into the sky and into outer space. While flying, the brain can be said to have maximized the performance of this spaceship. Nanling heard a clang sound from the spaceship at this moment, and felt that the spaceship was about to fall apart. He said, "Aunt Liji, how about we go slower?" I always feel that this ship can't withstand such an operation. Brain said, don't worry, I've seen that their equipment is still normal. The only thing to worry about is that the hull of this ship may not be very strong and there will be side leaks, so, don't take off your work clothes. If your work clothes have not been damaged, then it can barely cope with the depressurized environment. Nanling was speechless. It felt that even if they successfully seized the spaceship, they would still be in danger of death. This made him quite nervous and he used his gas perception with all his heart, hoping to make a difference at the critical moment. Unfortunately, Aunt Brain's words came true. Because they flew in a hurry, the broken spaceship was soon torn open by the dust in the air at the weak armor. Nanling's gas perception immediately felt that they were leaking. Almost reflexively, he blocked the hole with the reverse principle of wind pressure technique. He breathed a sigh of relief, thinking that it was fortunate that he reacted quickly. But his brain said in surprise, your trick is a bit bluffing. What level is your wind control technique? Nanling did not say. Although he was willing to believe Aunt Liji, after all, the two of them had been through hardships together, but he always instinctively felt that he should hide it if possible. Fortunately, Liji's brain noticed his reaction and immediately said, this is at least something that can be done by wind control technique LV6. Incredible, I have lived for more than 50 years and have only heard that people like you who take the path of cultivation can practice the basic attribute control to LV5 inches the key refining period, which is considered a good performance. Your talent is really amazing. After sighing, she concentrated on driving the spaceship, and there was no need for Nanling to answer this. Nanling also breathed a sigh of relief when he saw this. Now he also found that he was very good at wind control. This could not be fully explained by his time travel alone. The blood source of his body must be very extraordinary. At the same time, he also realized how wrong his previous views on various basic wind techniques were. At first, he thought that those wind skills were very simple and he could learn them at a glance. But in fact, these wind skills are normally learned by people who have reached LV2 of wind control skills, and the practice content is to help learners to improve their control level. His thoughts wandered a little, and he quickly came back to focus on the present. They had already rushed out of the atmosphere of OB 7561 and were getting rid of its gravitational lock. When they had already increased their speed to exceed the first cosmic speed, the other four ships displayed on the spacecraft system slowly took off from the surface of the planet. They were obviously caught off guard. And since they accelerated for so long, the other party obviously could not catch up with them. But this is not safe, and Nanling did not want to tangle with these people. He asked, can we perform hyperspace flight? Aunt Lizzie said, hyperspace flight requires the use of a gravity slingshot to launch us into hyperspace. The gravity of OB 7561 is not enough. We need to go to OB 7561c. That is the most massive gas planet in this star system. Fortunately, they are not very far away from this planet now. Chapter 16. Escape in an unexpected way. They are still chasing us. Aunt Brain suddenly reminded. Nanling's sense of crisis was too strong, and he couldn't help asking, is OB 7561c the only star in this galaxy that can help us enter hyperspace? Brain said faintly, of course not, there is another celestial body that can do it, and it can even be faster and more stable. Nanling suddenly looked in another direction, the location of the stars in the entire star system. Yes, it is OB 7561 now. We don't need to get too close to it to use its huge gravitational field to send us into hyperspace. The only problem is that we must withstand strong radiation. At that location, I'm afraid the shell of this broken spaceship can't withstand that kind of radiation. It will be very dangerous for you and me to be in it. Aunt Brain reminded. Nanling confirmed. I still have 3 anti-radiation needles, which should be enough for us to use by then. Aunt Brain said helplessly. Your sense of crisis, is it necessary to do this? Nanling said. Just treat it as a feint and tactical deception to make us safer. Brain did not refuse. She did not agree with Nanling's judgment, but she chose to obey. This is not about obedience or anything, it's just that Nanling is right, maybe it would be safer this way. Those looters actually chased them instead of fleeing when they knew they couldn't catch up. The problem here is too suspicious. Let's speculate on the worst case scenario. What if there are people ambushing them near OB 7561c? In contrast, facing the radiation brought by OB 7561 at the star in this star system, is at least a foreseeable danger that is controllable. Between the controllable danger and the unknown possible danger, Nanling and his brain chose the controllable danger that is bound to exist. So the spacecraft turned its head and changed its course and rushed straight towards the direction of the star. This choice obviously exceeded the expectations of those people. When they had already changed their course, the looters chasing them reacted belatedly and suddenly became chaotic. Some continued to catch up, some stopped where they were, and some ran around like headless flies. Seeing this, the brain laughed out loud. It seems that our actions have exceeded their plan, so we bet right, and OB 7561C must be a trap. She was about to say a few more dirty words, but she fell silent. Because they saw the huge starship that came out from the shadow behind OB 7561C, the interstellar frigate belonging to the Wind Consortium. It just came out from the shadow of the huge gas planet. Even though there was still a long distance between the two, Nanling and the brain felt an extremely huge oppression. Someone is stealing from the inside. The brain said with certainty. Nanling thought further and said, we have become their target of silencing now, which is terrible. Is there any way to bring them down? The brain also realized the seriousness of the problem. At this moment, the frigate had already opened its muzzle and fired at them. Unfortunately, their broken ship didn't even have a shield, and basically it would be turned into space dust if it was hit. Fortunately, their previous adventure for safety was successful. At this time, they were far enough away from the frigate that the enemy's energy attack could only cover the area where they were, but could not produce precise killing. However, the enemy's firepower was too dense, and Nanling felt like he was covered by a hail of bullets. At this time, they also entered the star gravitational range of the OB 7561 galaxy, and the first thing they felt was the terrible radiation. This radiation made Nanling feel that the spaceship he was on was no different from paper, and even the outer layer of the spaceship seemed to be transparent, and it was impossible to prevent those terrible rays from entering. He felt very bad, and felt that his body seemed to be riddled with holes all of a sudden, and the whole person quickly weakened. The spiritual power in his body could block the radiation for him, but that little spiritual power lost its activity after a while under the strong radiation as his body weakened, and became lifeless. In fact, Nanling had thought about whether this radiation could make him have a particularly good mutation or something. Just like the Fantastic Four. Unfortunately, he was just daydreaming. When he was really exposed to radiation, he felt that his body was about to collapse. He felt itchy all over and full of abnormality. At this time, Nanling said, I remember that there is a fleet of the White Feather Corps stationed near Chunyuan 06. The brain said, you are crazy. We will be blown to pieces. Nanling said, send identification information in time. We are all residents of Chunyuan 06. We are all people of the Wind Domain. I don't believe that they can even corrupt the White Feather Corps. The brain paused for a moment, letting herself think calmly. She said, yes, it is the best solution to ask the White Feather Corps for help at this time. And although 2/3 of the White Feather Corps military expenses are received from the Wind Consortium, the two are actually parallel and not subordinate. There is a chance. The brain immediately began to operate the device on the spacecraft that had started skipping frames to recalculate the heading, and then used the gravitational field of this star to make a hyperspace jump. At the same time, the frigate behind them also began to prepare for a hyperspace jump. They naturally used the gravitational field of OB 7561C. Even larger spaceships do not need to use the gravitational field of celestial bodies. Their huge bodies and mass can create a strong enough gravitational field to perform hyperspace jumps. Buzz Nanling only felt a muffled sound, and he felt that the spaceship he was on seemed to be suddenly shot out by a bowstring and disappeared on the spot. At the same time, the frigate behind them also entered the hyperspace flight state. Obviously, the other party did not intend to let them go. It's a pity that they only thought that Nanling and his team would return to the Dust Edge 06 space station, so they also made a hyperspace jump directly there. But they didn't expect that Nanling and his team were heading to the White Feather Legion's base in a similar direction. Boom. Nanling and his brain escaped from the hyperspace flight. At this moment, all kinds of harsh equipment alarms sounded around them. Then a hole suddenly tore open in the middle of the spaceship, and then the entire spaceship disintegrated on the spot. Nanling was completely stunned. Then he remembered that when he was approaching the radiation-filled star of OB 7561, he was unable to control his spiritual power and magic because of the severe radiation in his body. Their spaceship had already been damaged when it broke through the atmosphere of the planet OB 7561b, and it was all thanks to his wind pressure technique that the gap was plugged. It is normal for this broken ship to disintegrate in a minute for you to see when making a hyperspace jump. For the White Feather Corps today, it was a very confusing feeling. The moment before, all members were on combat alert because of the detection of an illegal hyperspace jump, and the next moment they saw a pile of garbage come in. Is this a new strategy? Ms. Fenyi, the commander of the White Feather 6th Fleet, was drinking coffee in her captain's seat. She was young, beautiful and talented, and most importantly, her last name was Feng. This was when she was full of confidence, and even the urgent alarm could not move her. As a result, she suddenly saw a person in the work clothes of the Fen Consortium sticking to her bridge window with his teeth and claws. I almost spit out that mouthful of coffee. Chapter 17 Commander Fenyi. Ms. Fenyi was very elegant and beautiful. She didn't spit out her coffee. She just stretched out her hand and asked her men to catch the man who almost made her spit, and tortured him severely. Not long after, she saw the young man holding a brain tightly on the bridge. Originally, she didn't need to care about such things at all, and just let her men do it. But who made her elegant but boring? So she took another sip of coffee and watched how her men tortured the unfortunate robber. Who knew that the problem could be seen at a glance? Nanling was a little dizzy. The influence of radiation was very great, and even affected his thinking ability. He was thrown into a dark room very rudely. When he was confused, he saw a very tall and strong man standing in front of him. Tell me your origin and identity, and the purpose of coming here, the man said in a low voice. Nanling was about to explain everything. As a result, the man suddenly interrupted again. I advise you to think about it before you speak, and it's best to say everything you need to say in one breath, so that we don't get into trouble later. Nanling saw that he stopped and was about to speak immediately. But the man interrupted again. You know, our White Feather Corps has a brainwave reading device, right? In fact, I can dig out your brain and analyze the information inside bit by bit. Nanling began to roll his eyes. It was difficult for him to maintain his state now. He always felt that he would die if he continued like this. He wanted to speak again. As a result, the man interrupted again. I hope you can cherish the opportunity I give you to speak, otherwise, Nanling finally cursed. You'll let me speak. I have such a serious radiation sickness. If you don't let me speak, I will die in front of you. Do you believe it? The strong man was embarrassed. Ms. Fenyi, who was watching this scene through surveillance, couldn't help laughing. She felt that her guard was really too stupid, and the unlucky guy who was caught was really too pitiful. Here, Nanling roared and felt a little uneasy, and found that the person opposite him suddenly stopped talking. He was too dizzy to think about it, and just said quickly, My name is Nanlin, this brain is Li Ji, we are all citizens of the lower district of Chenyuan 06, and we were previously on a mission of collecting Earth Marrow in OB 7561b. We are all employees of the Fen Consortium and have contracts. The strong man in front of him was surprised at the time, and then he seemed even more at a loss. Fortunately, a pleasant female voice suddenly came from above his head and said, Inject them with anti-radiation needles immediately, it doesn't sound like they are lying. Fenyi was more decisive than expected, because the information Nanling said was detailed enough for her to conduct accurate inquiries. At this time, an electronic female voice sounded on her bridge. Commander, the other party's identity information has been confirmed, and it is the same as what he said. They are all short-term contract workers of the consortium. Ms. Fenyi nodded, and then pondered to herself. Maybe, something went wrong. Nanling was injected with an anti-radiation needle, and it was obviously a very advanced injection. It not only eliminated the residual radiation in his body, but also served as a nutritional supplement to repair the damage to his body. He was still conscious, and at this moment he heard a soft but arrogant female voice on the overhead communication. Are you still conscious? Nanling nodded with all his strength, and before the person could ask again, he said directly, We were attacked by the robbers, and the outer space station was directly shot down. We escaped by robbing a robber spaceship. Nanling felt that his strength was recovering, and he had a little more strength to speak. He looked at Aunt Li Ji who was lying aside, and her brain seemed to be restarting as well. As a separate brain, she was obviously more fragile, and she was silent directly after enduring excessive radiation, which made Nanling very worried. However, at this moment, the soft female voice above her head suddenly said in a gentle voice, There is something wrong with your words. At this moment, the strong man who had been an amateur interrogator in front of Nanling suddenly became furious, grabbed Nanling's collar and pulled him up and said, How dare you deceive Miss Fenyi? At this time, Fenyi's voice came. No, he didn't lie to us, he just hit something. Nanling knew that Miss Fenyi must be very knowledgeable, so he began to tell the story in another way. He told everything he encountered on OB 7561 inches detail, without any exaggeration, and completely omitted his and Liji's inferences in the middle, just simply telling one thing. So, Aunt Liji and I waited in my shelter for 24 hours before going out. But I didn't expect the looters to still be there, but their big ship left, leaving 5 small boats waiting for us on the ground. We had no choice but to take a small boat and leave when they were not prepared. When we left, we happened to encounter the frigate under the jurisdiction of the company. They seemed to have misunderstood something and chased us relentlessly. We could only take the risk of using the star's gravitational field to jump into hyperspace. He spoke quickly, but the key elements were complete, making it very clear what happened here. Fenyi asked, "Where did the frigate appear?" Nanling pointed to the location of OB 7561C. Fenyi said softly, "I roughly understand what's going on, and I understand your concerns. Please rest assured, I will send someone to send you back to Chinyuan 06 after you recover, and you don't have to worry about anything involving you." It seems that the conversation is about to end. Nanling shouted, "Wait." Fenyi's voice sounded, "Is there anything else?" Nanling said, "There is one thing. When I left, I brought all the Earth essences collected by my station with me. However, the spacecraft disintegrated just now, and now it should be floating in space with my chulks." Fenyi said unexpectedly, "You are very dedicated." Nanling said modestly, "I signed a contract with the consortium." Fenyi did not answer again, and obviously left. At this time, the Iron Tau-like strong man finally appeared from the shadow in front. Nanling saw the image of the strong man clearly, and it was not surprising that he was a steel body. I don't know what part of his body is flesh and blood. This time, the strong man was much more polite to Nanling. He said, "You are all good. I will arrange a cabin for you to rest. You should be able to go back in 2 days." He turned and left, but asked the 2 pure robots beside him to help take Nanling to his temporary residence. Nanling was slightly relieved when he saw this. At least his life was saved. The only thing that worried him was his brain. If his brain really couldn't wake up, he might lose a lot of insurance compensation. This made him very sad. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novel, as there you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 18 Virtual Community. Nanling was taken to a lounge. It was not a big place, but it had a bed and a bathroom. It seemed that they wanted him to stay here for a while. Although he didn't know how long he would stay here, he decided to make the best of it. They wouldn't let him starve to death here, would they? He began to sit cross-legged and recuperate. His body had been severely damaged by radiation before, and it would be a hassle to repair it now. Fortunately, he had been injected with the advanced version of the White Feather Core anti-radiation injection. Now his body was recovering well, and the activity of his spiritual power had also been restored. In the inner vision brought by the auxiliary instrument, he guided his spiritual power to nourish and restore his poor physical condition. This was really a bad situation. He had originally been ambitious and thought that he would soon break through to the 7th level of Ki refining, but he didn't expect to encounter such a thing. After refining Ki for a while, his condition was better. In fact, it was not that the effect of the spiritual energy circulation was really that good, but that his body organs were stimulated to have more vitality under the nourishment of the spiritual energy. After recovering for a while, he began to look around his room. One thing is certain, he must be under the other party's all-round surveillance, so he will never do anything out of line. Looking at Liji's brain on the table, he thought about it and reached out to touch it. The auxiliary instrument immediately tried to connect to the vehicle system of the brain, but he did not get any useful information, only feedback that the other party was in hibernation. Nanling was a little disappointed, and then he used the auxiliary instrument to scan the various facilities in the room, wanting to see what fun he could find during this time. Soon he found a data interface, which means that this room can be connected to the internet. But how to get through? This data interface is suitable for people who have undergone brain-computer interface transformation. Brain-computer interface transformation is common among residents above the middle-level area, but the coverage rate in the lower-level area is not that high. Nanling is a poor man, so naturally he didn't install a brain-computer interface for himself. Fortunately, there was an auxiliary instrument. He thought about it for a while, and then tried to poke his finger into the socket. System words instantly appeared on his retina. Unknown network detected, network connection in progress, connected to the internal network of the Bayou 6th Fleet, obtained visitor privileges, and now users can visit the virtual community of the Bayou 6th Fleet as a visitor. Nanling was quite surprised. Who knows what interesting things will be hidden in this virtual community? Such an internal network is actually equivalent to an independent virtual community. Many soldiers of the Bayou Corps always have to find things to do after daily affairs, right? Therefore, this kind of virtual community is generally based on entertainment and leisure. An option appeared on Nanling's retina, asking him whether to access the data world of the virtual community. He chose yes, and the next moment the picture in front of his eyes changed, and he appeared in front of a very warm and ancient street. This street is the virtual community of the Bayou 6th Fleet, and he only felt very familiar when he looked at it. Because this virtual street actually looks a bit like the pedestrian street of the era when he once lived. He had never thought that such a pedestrian street was anything special, but now, after experiencing the dark world of the lower class, he felt that the scene in front of him, with blue sky, white clouds and warm sunshine when he looked up, and the prosperous city when he looked down, was really familiar. He walked in this virtual community with a trace of joy, but the shops on both sides surprised him. Because these so-called shops are actually the entrances to guide tourists to wonderful places. Just like the shop on Nanling's left-hand side, the sign on it is Underwater World. And then on the right-hand side is Sunlight Beach. There is no doubt that these are the entrances to tourist attractions. Nanling's interest in this faded a little. These are all scenes he has seen before. He has seen the real ones, so naturally he doesn't care too much about these virtual scenes constructed with data. But after walking around again, he found something that interested him. For example, there is a video store here, where you can choose to pay to download your favorite music and video information. The most important thing is that the music and videos here are only charged for works within 100 years, while works beyond 100 years can be downloaded for free. This is because the copyright protection period for music and video products is expired in 100 years. Nanling wanted to download all this information at the time. Unfortunately, his auxiliary instrument did not have enough memory capacity. If he had a smart core now, it would be fine, but unfortunately he did not have one, so he could only browse online but not download. This made him lose interest, but at least he knew that such audio and video products without copyright protection could be loaded for free, which means that as long as he could connect to the internet and enter other virtual communities, he would also have download rights. Then he left the audio and video store and went to other places. There are still many fun things here, such as several virtual reality games that can be played, and most of them are free. Nanling is extremely cautious about free games, and he dares to bet that there must be recharge entrances in such games. Then he looked at several places, and the one that made him most excited was the virtual training ground of the 6th Fleet. He was very curious about what it would be like inside, but unfortunately he only had visitor privileges and had no chance to go to such places. In the end, he chose to stay in a bookstore. As a carrier of information, e-books can carry the largest amount of information with the smallest memory, which is crucial for him at present. With the pitiful memory capacity of his auxiliary instrument, this information is probably the most valuable. Unfortunately, the information that can be loaded for free in this bookstore can only be regarded as basic knowledge. Once it involves spell information, it will become a paid content. Nanling was a little disappointed about this, but he still put all his energy into mastering this basic information. If he just wanted to live in the lower area of Chinuano 6 in this life, then this basic information would be worthless to him. If he just wanted to make a name for himself in Chinuano 6 in this life, then mastering 30% of this basic information would be enough. If he wanted to make a difference in the entire wind region or even travel the entire galaxy, then he must master all of this. Without the wisdom core to save him from worry, he can only rely on his own brain to learn and remember. What's more, he felt that since he had embarked on the path of self-evolution and strengthening through cultivation, his brain might not be worse than the wisdom core. He showed great confidence. After all, he was really poor and only had this confidence. Chapter 19 Compensation. Nanling gained a lot of basic information. The greatest value to him was that his 4th year of basic education finally started to make rapid progress. This was because the basic information filled in his missing foundation and answered his doubts. Therefore, he was not confused by the bright lights and nights in the virtual community. After a short experience of various virtual scenes, he selected some old songs for free download and started to study while playing music. This prosperous world is indeed very attractive, but he knows that he must have enough knowledge to cope with the impact of this era. He must be prepared. If he is well prepared, he will be able to feel the kindness of this world, and if he is not prepared, he may feel the malice of this world in the future. Blooping diddle, a person hums a song in the room. There is nothing much to say, and it is not shameful. It's so noisy. Suddenly a voice roared with a little collapse, which scared Nanling. He turned his head and saw that the brain was jumping up and down beside him. She was sleeping soundly, but was awakened by this devilish sound. No one would be in a good mood. Nanling stopped but didn't feel embarrassed. It was just that his tone deafness was discovered. Aunt Liji has been listening to it for 3 years. She is Tune's own. He said happily. Aunt Liji, you're awake? I feel relieved to know that you are okay. Liji snorted and said, I think you are worried that your huge insurance compensation will not be paid. She complained mercilessly because she knew that there was no need to be merciful to this kid. After a pause, she asked, where is this? Have we left the Bayou 6th Fleet? Nanling said, this is it. We are temporarily required to stay here. This is the 2nd day. You have been in a coma for 2 days, but I am worried about you. Liji's brain was like a spirit. She twisted her body in the nutrient solution, as if she heard something that made her hair stand on end. She said, okay, this is understandable. What's your entertainment? Nanling pointed to the internet port and said, you can connect to the internet there. Liji's brain crawled over without saying a word, and when she stuffed a spider leg into the broken end, she actually let out a satisfied sigh. This brain must be sick. And it's not a light disease. In this era, because the virtual world is so good, I heard that many people are addicted to virtual communities. Nanling ignored her and just continued to study. He is now restudying from the first year of basic education, because he found a very important trick, that is, through the study of each year of basic education, he can connect to various books that record basic information he has obtained. This makes his grasp of knowledge more solid, and the 3rd year exam that he barely passed has become simpler, and the study of the 4th year has also become a lot easier. The auxiliary instrument played a very critical role at this time. According to his needs, it lists the bibliography for him at the fastest speed. Of course, this learning speed will definitely slow down overall, but Nanling knows that this is a process he must go through. At this time, Aunt Liji exclaimed, oh no, guess what I saw? Nanling asked curiously. What? Liji said. It's Chunyuan 06. A large-scale screening starting from the upper district is being launched. 11 big men living in the upper district have been found to have financial problems, and many managers of companies and consortiums living in the middle district have also been taken away. Just from this movement, Chunyuan 06 seems to be turning upside down. She did not say how this large-scale screening happened, but the tone of lingering fear has already pointed out the direction. Nanling complained. Don't worry, this is just turning upside down. The lower district will not turn upside down, it will be the same as it should be. Liji agreed. That's right, but our life will be much better after we return to Chunyuan 06. Such a big thing, no one will pay attention to our role in it. Nanling also nodded repeatedly after listening, thinking that this matter made sense. He saw Liji suddenly silent again. At first he didn't think anything of it. But when he ate some food delivered by the robot and saw that she didn't move, he asked, what are you doing? She didn't turn her head, but answered, I'm applying for insurance money for you. Don't make a noise. I'm arguing with that salesperson. Nanling was so anxious when he heard it. He used to think that it was a good thing that he didn't have a brain-computer interface, but now he thought that if he could install a wireless signal receiver through the brain-computer interface, he could now see how much insurance money he could get. After being so anxious for a while, Liji disconnected her interface, and then jumped up happily and cheered. 200,000 Lingzhu points. I'm rich. Nanling blinked, and then realized that she must be talking about the insurance compensation she had received. He quickly asked, Aunt Liji, what about me? What about mine? He was very anxious. After all, the auxiliary instrument he had bought with all his savings was only 68,800 Lingzhu points. If he could also get 200,000 inches compensation, wouldn't it mean that he could complete the 3 major items? This was too tempting for him. Liji turned her head and looked at him and said, didn't you see your account information? Nanling was stunned for a moment, then said, "I'm not online, how can I see it?" Li Ji said, "Don't worry, your 100,000 compensation should have arrived." Nanling was very disappointed. Did he only have 100,000? But then he realized one thing, that is, his contract should be different from Li Ji's. He is just a miner, and Li Ji belongs to the technical position of the central control, so the insurance amount must be different. So he scratched his head and muttered, "It seems that I can only buy a spiritual furnace first." Aunt Brain did not respond, but just stared at him with a strange look. Nanling touched his face and asked, "What's wrong?" Li Ji said, "I thought you would be angry, and even ask me why I have 200,000 and you only have 100,000. Nanling asked, "Aunt Li Ji, why do you think so?" Li Ji said, "Because I know you are short of money and want to make money." Nanling blinked and said, "This money was not in my plan, and Aunt Li Ji, you helped me earn this money, why should I be angry?" Li Ji turned her head away and said with a very vicissitudes of life, "How can I let you survive alone in this cannibalistic world with your appearance?" Nanling laughed and said, "Knowing the limits, loving money but not being greedy, this is my way of survival." Li Ji didn't seem to want to talk about this topic anymore. She suddenly said, "Regarding the use of your 100,000, I actually think that since you are taking the self-study route, you should equip the 3 major items as quickly as possible." Nanling nodded and said, "I know, but my 100,000 is only enough to buy a spirit furnace for the time being." Li Ji suddenly sneered. "What are you thinking about? A spirit furnace worth 100,000 is already the price of a mid to high-end product. Why do you, a small key refining stage cultivator, need such a good spirit furnace? The correct solution is to buy 2 entry-level models and get the 3-piece set as soon as possible." Nanling was greatly touched when he heard it. He felt that what Li Ji said made sense. It was precisely because he knew how much improvement the auxiliary instrument brought to him that he understood that getting the 3 major pieces would definitely be a qualitative change for him. Therefore, he said to his brain, "Aunt Li Ji, can I go online for a while?" Li Ji asked, "What do you want to do?" Nanling said, "I want to see the styles of the wisdom core and the spirit furnace." Li Ji's brain laughed strangely and gave up the position. She seemed to be very accomplished that Nanling could follow her advice. Chapter 20 Complete Set. It was still the virtual community of the 6th Fleet. Nanling was familiar with it this time. He came to one of the shops with a clear goal. It was a shop that specialized in the 3 major items for practitioners, called the Daily Treasure Shop. The shop looked high-end and classy. Nanling was a little unconfident when he stood at the door. After lowering his head to confirm the balance in his account, he was a little bolder. He stood at the door of the shop and hadn't pushed the door yet. As a result, just like the legendary teleportation array, the scene in front of him changed directly and entered the interior of the shop. "Welcome, what would you like to see?" An AI lady bowed to him politely, feeling full of classical beauty. But Nanling felt a little awkward when he looked at it, because this AI lady was wearing a tight-fitting suit full of technology, not a traditional Chinese costume. He felt a little regretful, but since the other party could still restore this etiquette, he had already greatly favored her. He said, "I want to buy a spirit furnace and a wisdom core, with a budget of 80,000 spirit BART points. Do you have any good recommendations?" He left 20,000 for himself because he would settle down in the middle-level area in the future, and he had to have some money to protect himself. As for the fact that he asked the AI girl to recommend something without even looking at it, it can only be said that he went to the other extreme after being enlightened by Li Ji. That is, since he is using a transitional product now, it doesn't matter what the performance is, as long as it can be used. So he decided to operate in the simplest way that would not waste his time and energy, that is, to let the AI directly select the goods for him. If he were to choose the goods himself, he would definitely have to look at the performance parameters, functional preferences, etc. Which would be very troublesome. It would probably take him 3 or 5 days to decide, and even if he decided, it would be difficult to guarantee whether he would regret it in the future. Now he decided to be lazy and let the AI select the goods for him, since it was just a transitional product anyway. At this time, the AI girl also paused for a moment, probably because she had never met such a direct customer. However, the customer is God, and it still smiled and said politely, "Then may I ask what attribute the customer has, and what kind of skills are they practicing?" Nanling couldn't help but say with some embarrassment, "Does this have an impact?" Miss AI said, "Of course it has an impact, just like our wind domain has the most wind attributed skills, so the technology of the spirit furnace attribute leaning towards the wind attribute is the most advanced and mature, and the smart core is also the best in this regard." After all, the various auxiliary functions of the smart core require big data support to be the best, and in the wind domain, the wind attribute is naturally better. Nanling replied, "Well, I happen to be wind attributed, but I practice the basic key refining technique." He was very decisive, although there seemed to be a tendency towards fire in his blood. But he didn't have the mind to practice both wind and fire, and it was already very good to be able to practice a wind attribute well. If he was born noble and had countless resources, he would definitely think about wind and fire dual cultivation, but now he grew up in an orphanage, and he will spend most of his life in the wind domain, so his choice is very simple. Just focus on the wind attribute. At this time, the AI lady said, "Do you already have an auxiliary instrument? What model is it?" Nanling answered truthfully, "Weaving Wind Type 3. The AI lady said at the time, "Then I suggest that you can also choose the same series of wisdom cores and spirit furnaces as the Weaving Wind Type 3. After all, if the three major items are a set, it can reduce a lot of running in time and can have the best matching effect. And the Weaving Wind Type 3 is originally a system that focuses on balance, and it must be able to meet the various needs of customers." Nanling frowned slightly. Of course, he knew that it would be better if the Weaving Wind Type 3 was a set, but he was short of money. He had already calculated that according to the market price, he would need at least 150,000 spirit baht points to complete the whole set. He had thought the same thing before, and he gritted his teeth and saved up a set, but after being enlightened by Li Ji, he decided to use whatever he had first. Moreover, even if the Wind Weaver III was his ultimate goal, he didn't believe that his life would stop there. So he said calmly at this time, "But the budget, Miss Ai has said. Although in this case the two items only cost 72,000 Lingzhu points, and there is room for 8,000 Lingzhu points, but we can suggest that the guest add 12,000 Lingzhu points and purchase the foundation building part of the Xuanfengzhui. This will be a very appropriate strengthening plan." Nanling was stunned, and he asked, "Is the Zifeng suit here so cheap?" Miss Ai smiled and said, "Guest, don't forget that this is the virtual community of the Bayou 6th Fleet. All goods under the Fen Consortium enjoy tax exemption and no value-added treatment." Nanling still pointed to his nose in disbelief and asked, "Is it okay if I'm not a member of the fleet?" Miss Ai said, "The guest has visitor privileges, so it's naturally possible. If the guest has already joined the Bayou fleet, then the Xuanfengzhui of the Jindan period can be distributed as a welfare." Nanling widened his eyes and thought to himself that it was no wonder that outsiders were trying their best to get into the official institutions of the Fenyu. The difference was indeed too big. How infuriating. The gap was already big enough, and now there is another gap in resource utilization. It is really too difficult for ordinary people to compete with these geniuses in the system. He finished his online shopping and seemed a little lost. Li Ji leaned over and asked, "Why do you look so dejected? Can't you afford the things you like?" Nanling shook his head and said, "No, I have already bought what I need." Li Ji asked, "How much did you spend?" Nanling said, "I spent 92,000, which is a bit over budget." Li Ji was a little disappointed when she heard it and said, "What do you mean by some? It's a bit difficult to settle down in the middle-level area with only 8,000 Lingzhu points. What did you buy?" She was a little angry. This was strange. She was actually angry at Nanling for spending money lavishly. She said, "Where did you buy it? Did you get cheated?" Before Nanling could say anything, a robot voice appeared at the door. "Dear guest, the Zifeng Type the 3rd Spirit Furnace and Zifeng Type the 3rd Intelligence Core you ordered have been delivered. In addition, the foundation building content of Xuanfengzhui you subscribed to has been loaded into the Intelligence Core. You can read it at your own convenience." The brain stopped talking for a moment. After the robot put Nanling's express box into the room and left, she asked in astonishment, "The cheapest one of the three types of Zifeng, at least 60,000 spiritual baht points, right? How did you do it?" Nanling sighed and said, "This is what makes me uncomfortable. Members of the White Feather Corps can get these things tax-free and without added value. This is too shameless. If we buy these outside, it will cost twice as much." Li Ji's cerebral cortex trembled obviously. She asked, "Can we enjoy these treatments too?" Nanling nodded and said, "At least the Zifeng 3-type spiritual furnace and intelligence core I bought can enjoy them." Li Ji screamed at the time, "Ah! I have 200,000, I can buy a lot of things." She seemed to be crazy. The mechanical spider legs under the base of the brain suddenly jumped up, and her brain jumped to the network port like a jump, and then couldn't wait to connect herself to the virtual community of this fleet. TS came. Nanling shook her head to indicate that her brain was crazy. Then, his eyes were shining as he focused on the spirit furnace and intelligence core he had obtained. This was really a pleasant surprise. He originally thought that he would have to save money for a long time to buy the complete set, but he didn't expect that the White Feather 6th Fleet would be able to complete it all at once. If he had any complaints about being detained here before, now he just wanted to hold on to the big white legs as Ms. Fenyi and never let go. Chapter 21. It hurts the first time. Nanling felt a little bit uncomfortable watching the brain making crazy noises from time to time while surfing the internet. He himself was a little curious and pondered the new equipment he had bought. Although it was a destined transitional product, he was still looking forward to it. He opened the package of the spirit furnace first, but when the box was opened, it turned out to be a breastplate. The breastplate was very bloated and did not look like it was used for combat at all. Nanling did not know how to use it for a while, but fortunately it also had an AI assistant. Dear user, welcome to use the Zifeng series products. This product is a Zifeng Type 3 external spirit furnace equipment. Since it is detected that you have not installed a spirit furnace before, you need to install a storage device separately. There will be some pain during the installation of the storage device. You can inject anesthetics or endure it for a while. Nanling's scalp numbed when he heard it. Is this going to be a human body modification? Although he knew that this was necessary in order to adapt to this era, he could not avoid the discomfort in his heart. He looked at the system prompt that appeared on his retina, and the auxiliary device had begun to connect. He asked, "What is the installation process of the containment device?" The auxiliary instrument was unambiguous and directly showed him some pictures. It was to make a shallow hole in his chest. Then a slightly concave metal device was buried in it. This metal device would have a soft probe that penetrated deep into his body and directly connected to his Tanzthong Qi. But this probe was not to destroy his Qi that stored his spiritual power, but to connect his Qi with the spirit furnace, so that he could easily mobilize the spiritual power stored in the spirit furnace from then on. The spirit furnace, in professional terms, is the legendary external elixir. It's just that the scientific researchers of this era obviously don't know how to refine the external elixir of traditional practitioners, so they just made one in their own way. After watching the process, Nanling hesitated a little, but gritted his teeth and put on this armor-like auxiliary installation device. It's okay to transform it, but he can still tolerate such a small degree of transformation. However, he did not choose to take anesthesia, because he was very worried that his Tanzthong Qi would be damaged by this operation, so he had to look inside and stare at it throughout the process. In this way, he watched helplessly as a layer of skin and flesh was shaved off his chest, and even a little bone was dug out. He felt very severe pain during this process. However, the operation of this machine was very smooth and fast. After a short pain, the container was installed and embedded in his bones. Not only did it not affect the strength of his bones, it seemed to have strengthened them. It can only be said that it is worthy at being a mature human body modification technology. When Nanling screamed, it was already done. "What the hell are you screaming about?" The disturbed brain turned to look at him, and then said in a complicated way, "Kid, is this your first time? Bear with it, you'll soon feel its benefits." The tone of a person who has experienced it was like an old procuress introducing her experience to the new girl under her command, saying that this kind of thing must be enjoyed. Nanling looked at her, and for some reason, he could actually see a smiling face in the folds of her brain, which really scared him. He thought that he was hallucinating because of the pain. But before he could say anything else, the brain had already gone online again, humming and humming, looking like a serious internet addiction. Nanling did not finish his words and just focused his attention on the remaining Zifeng the third type intelligence core. The spirit furnace has been connected, but because the intelligence core is not in place, the auxiliary instrument has shut down and blocked all the functions of the spirit furnace for him. This is a protection program, because once the spirit furnace is turned on and he does not have the intelligence core to help, the surging spiritual power may burst his meridians. But Nanling was a little hesitant. If it hurts to install the intelligence core, should he take a break first? However, Nanling still made up his mind. The pain will pass after a while. He does not want to put it off until tomorrow. Then he took off the auxiliary device on his body, revealing the installed spirit furnace. The previously installed storage device is a concave disk, and at this time there is a green and clear sphere in the center of the disk slowly rotating in it. This is the main body of the spirit furnace, which makes his body look a bit sci-fi. Then he opened the packaging of the intelligence core. This time the things are very simple. The main body is a diamond-shaped green crystal, and there are many accessories. There are more than 10 kinds of products, such as headbands, hairpins, earrings, and studs. These are all different ways of wearing that merchants prepare for customers. There are even some similar to the spirit furnace storage device, which is to make a groove on the forehead of a person and embed the diamond crystal into it. Nanling would not want to make a hole in his forehead again, but he had to consider the convenience of combat. If the wisdom core suddenly fell off during a fight with someone, who would he go to for justice? So after thinking about it, Nanling decided to choose to make an earring. It will be a little painful, and under normal circumstances, there is no need to worry about it falling off. And it is also convenient to replace. If it is really embedded in the forehead like that, will it hurt again when it is upgraded next time? Anyway, Nanling feels that he is afraid of pain. After installing the wisdom core on the earring and then nailing it on his ear, the first thing Nanling did was to look in the mirror. Fortunately, it looks good. He breathed a sigh of relief, and then the auxiliary instrument connected the wisdom core, and the wisdom core drove the spirit furnace again. The benefits of the three-piece set were reflected. The information exchange between the three was completed in almost 2 seconds, and then the spirit furnace began to operate, constantly absorbing free spiritual power from the surrounding void. This kind of directly absorbed spiritual power is actually very violent, but as long as these spiritual powers are in the spirit furnace, the wisdom core can completely control them and continuously inject them into Nanling's body like a trickle. Originally, Nanling was in the accumulation stage of the 6th level of key refining, and after this gurgling external spiritual power was injected, it was immediately perfectly controlled by the wisdom core, guiding it to quickly walk around in a profound trajectory that Nanling did not recognize, and then it was refined and returned to the TC in the Tanzthong. Nanling was very surprised, and just as he was shocked, he saw that there was already a system text projection on his retina. The Xuanfeng has been automatically run. Note that the user's Xuanfeng only has content from key refining to foundation establishment. Please update more content as soon as possible, otherwise the user will not be able to break through to the golden core stage. Nanling ignored the following content. Only then did he realize that the spiritual power running trap just now was actually the Xuanfeng. Moreover, he bought the foundation building period, but it actually gave him everything from key refining to foundation building. It was absolutely conscientious. At this time, he checked the properties of his 2 new equipment. The spirit furnace was a large capacity external Danton. According to the data, it was equivalent to the spiritual power reserve of 3 5th level Jindan cultivators. For Nanling, this was awesome. The computing power brought by the smart core increased by 7 times, not including its large capacity memory space. The only bad thing was that Nanling felt the spiritual power in his body that suddenly started to run automatically, and suddenly he felt insecure. He just felt that his body was controlled by the machine. Chapter 22 Competing with Myself. The 3-piece set brought Nanling such a huge improvement that he felt that no matter how hard he tried, he would never be able to catch up with his current self. The spirit furnace constantly absorbed the free energy around it and injected it into his body. This was more than 10 times faster than simply accumulating spiritual power through key refining technique. The wisdom core guided his spiritual power in the most standard trajectory, so that he would never go wrong. Even under the guidance of the wisdom core, he was practicing key every moment, and the spiritual power in his body automatically ran slowly, improving his cultivation every moment. This improvement was really terrifying. Perhaps it was because of this huge improvement that even though he knew that this was the normal situation for cultivators in this era, he still felt trembling and uneasy. The powerful functions of the 3-piece set even made Nanling feel that it was the equipment that controlled the person instead of the person controlling the equipment. And that's not all. He found that the basic education content that was originally very difficult to learn became extremely simple at this moment. The wisdom core gave the most standard answer to the originally difficult questions just by thinking about them. It seemed that he had thought of it himself, but in fact he understood that it was the wisdom core that studied it into his brain. He spent several months studying hard, but after loading the wisdom core, he mastered it all at once, which made the time he spent before seem worthless. However, it was this sharp contrast that made Nanling feel even more uneasy. He tried the wind pressure technique that he was very good at. The wisdom core immediately helped him mobilize his own spiritual power and performed the wind pressure technique for him in the most correct way. And it was this time that made him see the difference and feel a little relieved. Because the wind pressure technique performed by the wisdom core is not stronger than his own, and there was actually a very obvious difference between the two. Nanling's wind pressure technique had a strong personal style and seemed more heavy and powerful, because he always wanted to increase the wind pressure. The standard version of the wind pressure technique of the wisdom core seemed more agile and swift, which was almost the standard answer for all wind techniques. However, Nanling knew that the wind pressure technique performed by the wisdom core was only this good, but his own wind pressure technique could be even stronger. Because for the wisdom core, LV8 was the limit, and he could also try LV9 or even LV10. This is the difference that machines can never replace the human brain. Nanling realized. He must not rely on this thing completely, otherwise he would only be at LV8 inches his life. LV8 is not bad, but it is not the best. So he tried to use his own way to circulate his spiritual power to perform wind magic, but what made him unbearable was that the wisdom core would actually correct his spiritual power every time, returning everything to its correct track. Nanling was very annoyed by this. At the same time, he felt a sense of confusion in his heart. He just felt that this wisdom core was trying to control his thoughts. Just imagine, if everyone in the world is used to the powerful function of the wisdom core, everyone can use standard wind magic, then what is the difference between it and a robot? This made him fall into a certain degree of confusion. He began to compete with the wisdom core for control over his body. If it really doesn't work, he thinks he can just take off the earring. Although the existence of the wisdom core has brought him great convenience, it has also brought him more panic. He tried again and again, just because he didn't believe it. Don't you believe that a man-made machine can distort his will? As a result, he gradually felt the existence of his own will, and let his own will begin to repeatedly pull with the spiritual power guided by the wisdom core. In this repeated pulling, the wind pressure technique in his palm gradually became both heavy and light and swift. To describe it in a word, lift a heavy weight as if it were a piece of cake. Then, at a certain moment, Nanling felt that he had finally forcibly suppressed another force, allowing the wind technique to run according to his own ideas. Ha! I succeeded. He cheered. He felt that this was a big step for him to overcome the domination of the wisdom core and a great victory in life. Then he felt that he was simply sick. Why did he compete with the wisdom core for so long? When he looked at the time, 5 hours had passed. He was too focused on what he did before. But the next moment he showed a surprised expression, because, where is his brain? No, where is the brain ant he picked up? While he was concentrating on competing with the wisdom core, the brain ant ran away from home. He was a little worried. After searching around, he found that she had left a message for him, leaving a line of words on the packaging debris that was thrown on the ground. I'm going to have a reconstruction operation and will be back soon, Monian. Nanling understood at a glance that this brain must have bought something online to install itself. Most likely, she will have a new prosthetic body, right? Nanling smiled and stopped worrying, and then prepared to continue to compete with the intelligence core. He was just so awkward. If the intelligence core didn't do what he wanted, he would never give up. He cast the wind pressure spell again. With the experience of the last time, he successfully overcame the resistance and completed his own spell. Then he began to try gaseous perception, boost jump, air shield, and locking breath. He would not stop until he made all these spells look like himself. As for the clean clothes spell, forget it. He didn't understand it deeply. It seemed that the method of the intelligence core was more efficient, so he didn't force it. In fact, he looked quite stupid like this. People in this era looked like they were competing with themselves. Another 2 hours later, a robot suddenly visited. When Nanling asked it to come in, he found that it was pushing a small cart with a square box on it. Looking at the time, because it was just dinner time, Nanling thought it might be here to deliver food to him. After all, Ms. Fenyi seemed to be quite artistic, so it didn't seem like a big deal to do something fancy when delivering food to him. The robot was also a no-nonsense person, and left without a word after delivering the food. Nanling curiously opened the lid of the box, expecting to find some interesting meal, but he almost dropped the box in his hand. Because there was a human head in it. A human head with eyes closed and sleeping. Nanling's heart was about to jump out of his chest, but fortunately he came to his senses and realized what was going on. He looked at the sleeping head in front of him speechlessly. Strictly speaking, it was the head of a beautiful girl who looked 16 years old and had 2 cute buns. He knew that this was his Aunt Li Ji who had returned. But why did she come back in the form of a human head? She got 200,000 inches compensation. So many Lingzhu points should be enough for her to replace a high-level prosthetic body, right? Scary. Chapter 23 Impulsive Consumption. Nanling and Li Ji's new head in front of him looked at each other in silence. This head is beautiful, but why is there only one head? Li Ji, who had just woken up, was still a little dizzy. Her brain had just changed into a new body and was still in the adaptation period. Nanling said, "This head costs 200,000. Li Ji woke up and said, "No, 300,000. I put all the money I spent on finding a man into it." Nanling. ... he said, "Top grade head." Li Ji said, "Top grade, perfect quality, so 300,000 is only enough to buy a head." Nanling understood. He just complained, "You told me to spend rationally before." Li Ji said, "That was for you." Nanling was speechless. This double standard is not covered up. But Li Ji was not embarrassed at all. Instead, she looked like she was completely clear. 8 spider-like mechanical legs suddenly crawled out from under her neck, and then this head crawled up by itself in an extremely terrifying way. Nanling looked at this horror movie-like scene from his previous life and thought it was okay. At least it looked better than a bald head. Just as they were staring at each other, there was a knock on the door. Nanling said, "Come in." Then a robot servant pushed the door open and brought Nanling's tools. It said, "Guest, your tools has been found." Nanling thanked him and took his tools. As a result, he felt a sinking sensation in his hand, and he was slightly stunned. Then he quickly opened the tools, only to see that the earth marrow he had harvested was still inside. He quickly took out the earth marrow and handed it to the robot servant, saying, "Why is this earth marrow still here? Please take it." The robot servant bowed gracefully and said, "Miss Yi thinks this tools is your personal property, so it is not convenient for us to open it. I praise your loyalty to your duties. You were a very good person." After the robot servant finished speaking, he took the earth marrow without any pretense, then said goodbye and turned away. Nanling smacked his lips and muttered, "This Miss Feng Yi is really a very particular person." Li Ji curled her lips in her heart and said, "Don't be fooled by this gesture. She is just testing your character." Nanling disagreed with this. He said, "She is a bit shot. Why would she go to such lengths to test me? I would rather believe that she is a very particular person." Li Ji said contemptuously, "I am beginning to doubt how you have survived to this day. How could you have such a naive idea?" After the crisis was over, the two began to have differences after only one day of getting along. But in fact, it is also true that different people get different feelings from different perspectives. Just like when Nanling saw Feng Yi's actions, he felt respect, while Li Ji saw it as a test. Nanling did not want to argue with Li Ji in this regard. They have different worldviews. Li Ji is very wary of everything in this world because of her life experience, while Nanling is willing to trust strangers, but he will not be less cautious. He said, "There's nothing much to say about this. Anyway, the big shots won't care what we think." Li Ji was silent for a moment, but she felt that Nanling was right. She sighed, "Yes, sometimes the gap is so big that even hypothetical hostility will seem ridiculous." She has come back to her senses now. Then she said, "Let's not talk about this. I'm penniless now and I have to find a job quickly. Don't you have a smart core? While you have nothing to do now, you can study how to settle down in the middle-class area." Nanling felt that this was the most realistic. Li Ji's new head occupied Nanling's bed without hesitation and squatted there to surf the internet. The new head is powerful and obviously has wireless internet access. Nanling didn't care when he saw this. He leisurely opened his toolbox again and took out the bag of fructose syrup that was only half left. He poured himself a glass of water, then threw a lemon-flavored fructose into it and inflated the sugar water. Hiccup, he was satisfied after drinking a glass of lemon soda. It was a nostalgic taste. It was a pity that he didn't know the formula of the factor of Taku's happy water, otherwise it would be perfect. Then he closed his eyes and entered the virtual community of Bayou 6th Fleet again. Originally, he and Li Ji could only use one network port to access the internet, but now both of them can access the internet without that network port. In the virtual community, Nanling did not stop at all this time, but appeared in front of a foreign affairs room as if teleporting. This is the connection between this virtual community and the external network. He pushed the door in and found countless network nodes appearing in his mind. It contained a huge flow of information. If he had been there before, he would probably have to wait for a while to figure out the situation. But now he has the help of the smart core, and he found the network node of Chinyuano 6 in an instant and connected to it. Looking for intel information in the middle level area. Nanling just gave an order, and immediately countless house rental and sales information appeared in front of him. The smart core quickly screened and summarized the information for him. He only needs to pay a little attention to any of the items, and the housing information in that item will appear in front of him in the form of a three-dimensional map. The smart core is really a thing that makes him hate and love it. It is convenient, too convenient. But it also makes Nandling too worried. However, although he has many concerns, he has no scruples in the virtual network at this time. Things here can be assisted by the smart core, and he will not argue. Just rent a house, a stable rental house. Well, arrange the rent from low to high. Nandling gave 2 screening conditions. Then the options in front of him were rearranged. Then he noticed a phenomenon, that is, all the houses with cheap rents are in the lower part of the middle class area, and as they move closer to the upper class area, the rent will continue to increase. Nandling asked curiously, "What's going on?" They immediately showed him a system text. According to user needs, it was found that the crime rate from the lower part of the middle layer to the ground is 10% higher than that of the middle and high layers. In addition, because most of the energy pipelines in the lower layer pass under the deck as the ground, and many of them have been in disrepair for a long time and have energy leakage, this area will have excessive radiation and abnormal temperature rise from time to time. The residents of the middle layer have gradually moved away from the low layer since 200 years ago. Nandling asked again curiously, "Isn't the management of the middle layer better? What's wrong with the operator of Chinyuan 06? We can't just turn a blind eye to such things, right?" The system answered. Search information. Energy pipeline maintenance workers have been attacked by intruders from the lower layer many times, and the middle layer union expressed collective resistance to such maintenance tasks. Nandling suddenly became energetic and asked, "Is this job still available now? How much does it cost?" He felt that he saw a business opportunity. Chapter 24 Turn Preparation. Nandling has chosen her next job, energy pipeline maintenance worker. She also picked a house for herself, which is absolutely cheap. This is all about low cost of living and high income. Previously, energy pipeline maintenance workers were frequently attacked. In fact, it was those scum babes in the lower area who secretly climbed into the mezzanine between the lower area and the middle area through the ventilation duct and targeted the maintenance workers. Nandling felt speechless when she heard the news. This group of scum babes is really scumbags. They even want to attack the hard work of maintaining the space station. No wonder the world in the lower area is always hot and humid, as if it is breeding bacteria all the time. It is really that the energy pipelines are damaged one after another and no one repairs them, causing various ventilation and heating and cooling facilities in the lower area to fail one after another. This is the standard style of the lower area. Some scum babes have plunged the entire lower area into a quagmire for the sake of petty profits. Nandling once complained about the poor management and inaction of the Fenyuan Operation Company, which manages the Chinyuan 06 space station, because of the poor environment in the lower area. Now Nandling wanted to thank those scum babes in the lower level area, because the attendance price of this maintenance worker's position has been pushed to 3,000 Lingzhu points per time. How can ordinary maintenance work have such a high income? Either sign a long-term contract or receive a fixed salary, or pay an attendance fee of 100 to 200 per time. Such a high single attendance fee can only mean one thing. This job is risking your life. You can get half of the amount by accepting the task, which is actually the settlement fee because no insurance company is willing to participate in this job. And the maintenance workers who accept this task are risking their lives. If they succeed 2 or 3 times, it will be enough for their families to live well in the middle level area for a while. Nandling values this job not because he is arrogant or careless. But he knows that with the nature of those scum babes in the lower level area, the people sent out to rob must be small characters. After all, the big guys in the lower level area will not risk appearing in such a radiation-rich area. Based on his understanding of the lower level district, those people would definitely not have any high-end detection equipment, and his breath-locking and refraction techniques would definitely be more effective in such an environment. He made this choice only when he was really sure. Having found a plan for his life in the middle-level district, at least a short-term plan, Nandling felt a little relieved. At this time, Liji opened her eyes and said, "You won't believe it, but I have found a job for myself." Nandling asked in surprise, "What is that?" Then he said, "I have found one too." Liji laughed and said, "It seems that we had the same idea. The turmoil in Chinyuan 06 has left many positions vacant in the middle-level district. I found myself a position as the security commissioner in the middle-level district." Nandling was speechless. The security commissioner is actually a local police officer. He didn't expect Liji to find such a position. He asked, "I thought you couldn't stand this kind of job with so many restrictions." Liji said, "There's no way. The benefits of this kind of public office are really too good." Nandling understood at once. He couldn't leave after enjoying the tax-free and value-added shopping experience here. He said speechlessly, then the requirements for entering the public office are not low, right? Li Ji paused, and then said, I now know how right it was for you to hand over all those precious earth marrows before. He directly raised our reputation value in Qinyuan 06 to a very high level. Nanling was a little surprised. Reputation value is a data that almost no one in the lower level area cares about, but he knows it is very important. Previously, because he was born in the lower level area, even though he had a good reputation after doing a lot of odd jobs, his reputation evaluation in the entire space station was still not high, only about 50. This is because he has no bad records. And being able to have a reputation value of 50 is also that key to his being able to accept the previous alien planet miner mission. So now, his intelligence core has shown him his current reputation value, 95. Although it is not full, it is already very remarkable. It's no wonder that Li Ji can easily get a public office, because a reputation value of 90 can meet the entry requirements for public office. Nanling felt a little excited at the time, because this reputation value is not only valid in Qinyuan 06, but also in the entire Fenyu. This is equivalent to the endorsement of the Fenyu official, indicating that he and Li Ji can be trusted. From this, they can get many hidden benefits, such as Nanling just submitted his job application as a maintenance worker, and the contract was sent on the spot without any review. At first, he thought that Fenyuan Operation Company was hungry and indiscriminate, but now it seems that it was entirely because of his reputation that the other party chose to trust him directly. Nanling felt that this time he was really lucky to be stuck on the porthole of the other party's flagship, and the harvest was too great. But he was still a little confused, and asked, I still feel a little strange. Although the earth marrow is very precious to us, those big guys don't have to make such a big fuss about it, right? What is going on? Li Ji turned her head and looked at the whole room, and then her pair of blue eyes, which looked like the second dimension, suddenly appeared with countless data streams. Nanling's intelligence core immediately received this data and displayed it on his retina. Wow! This is the cause and effect of the chaos on Qinyuan 06 that Li Ji collected. She sorted it out and sent it out. And Nanling also knew from this that his experience on OB 7561 was just the tip of the iceberg. First, a senior executive of Fenzi Operation Company was addicted to gambling and was in debt for a long time. Then there was news that the executive embezzled public funds to pay off the debt. Then there was a rumor that a senior executive of Qinyuan 6's escort fleet was the umbrella of the Black Forces, and the recent news had a large number of rotations of senior executives of the escort fleet. There were also many rumors and news involving other senior executives, which seemed to be irrelevant. But after being linked together by Li Ji, Nanling saw a huge black interest chain hidden in the upper, middle and lower levels of Qinyuan 06. He frowned and asked, since Ms. Fenyi can promote this cleansing, why didn't she do it before? Li Ji said, this kind of thing also requires evidence. After all, although Fenyu is the boss of their Fen family, it is not really I think you are guilty to convince the people below. Now that I think about it, this black interest chain in our matter is definitely exposed. After all, the frigate did not arrive in time, or it arrived but allowed the looters to do whatever they want. Maybe they still have reasons to quibble about this kind of thing, but I think if Miss Fenyi comes in person, she will not give them a chance to quibble. She paused and said, you can pack your things. This Miss Yi is vigorous and resolute. She has completed the cleanup before many people reacted. The current chaos is actually caused by the sudden power vacuum. We should be able to go back soon. As if to confirm her words, almost the next moment, the mechanical servant knocked on their door. It walked in and bowed, saying, dear guests, Miss Yi said you can leave now. A transport ship is about to depart and can take you there. Nanling was very impressed by Aunt Li Ji's judgment. Speaking of which, he still felt a little disappointed. The commander of the White Feather Legion, when will he become such a big shot? Chapter 25. Roommates with a head. It's time to go back home. Qinyuan 06 is Nanling's home, but there is no sense of belonging. Nanling quietly looked at the huge space station approaching through the porthole, and felt that he would leave here sooner or later. But now, he still needs to accumulate in this space station, this familiar place. The airport is very quiet, with almost no human voice. Nanling stood on a floating trapboard holding Li Ji's new head and moved quickly, following a specific path to the airport's passenger drop-off area. They came out of the unloading area, so they had to walk this way, which was actually an internal fast lane. There were more people in the passenger drop-off area, but these people were very quiet, and looked around very warily, avoiding direct eye contact with other people. It was very depressing and cold. But this is the reality of this era. Everyone is used to their wishes coming true on the internet and is indifferent to everything in reality. Nanling even felt that if it was not necessary, these people would not even want to go out. He was not very curious, so he walked onto a floating car holding Liji's head. The car was unmanned. Nanling just told the address of the house he rented, and the flying car flew out directly and quickly went to the target location. There are 3 roads out of the airport. One goes directly down, another one flies horizontally, and the other one goes up. These 3 roads led to the upper, middle, and lower divisions. Nanling's house in the middle district is not far from the airport. He has considered it on purpose. The location here is actually good. The main thing is that he can save a lot of money on taxis because it is close to the airport. As for the rent, it is not expensive. He has paid 1,200 Lingzhu points and rented it for half a year. In this way, plus the remaining money from the purchase of the Wisdom Core and the Spirit Furnace, and the last half of his salary, he still has a total of more than 10,000 Lingzhu points. In the short term, he can be considered to have no worries about food and clothing in the middle district. But Nanling will not think that he is safe and sound. He has many places to spend money. The cultivation of key refining stage was not difficult for him, but when he broke through the foundation building stage of the 10th level of key refining, it would be best to have a spiritual power infusion, which would cost a lot of money. Besides, he only had 5 basic wind skills, which was really shabby. He thought that there would be a wind skill included in the Zifeng intelligence core. As a result, it was cheaper to buy it in Bayou community, but the free stuff from the merchant was gone, and he had to buy it himself. The flying car flew on the empty and deserted streets, with buildings connecting the sky and the earth on both sides. It was obviously daytime, but there were few pedestrians. However, the most prosperous place in the middle area was indeed not here, but in the middle of the entire space, which was a scene of feasting and revelry. Nanling got off the flying car at this time and breathed the air here. He always felt that there was too much dust in the air. A lot of things were scattered on the top of his head, and the streets looked dirty. To be honest, his place was definitely the worst place in the middle area, but it was much better than the lower area. Hurry up and go in. I feel like the messy things floating down from above are going to make my hair dirty. Liji's head screamed. Nanling walked quickly towards the building in front of him. The entrance to the building was a rather heavy gate. Before Nanling stood in front of the door, a beam of light immediately scanned his entire body, and then a mechanical voice said, "Please enter the identification code." Nanling entered the identification code he obtained with the smart core. The next moment, the mechanical voice immediately became cheerful. "Dear guest, welcome to stay in Yuding Tianju, I wish you a pleasant stay." It was really ironic. He lived on the bottom floor, but the whole building was called Yuding Tianju. But there was no way, who asked Nanling to save money? He rented the cheapest apartment in Yuding Tianju. Not to mention being on the bottom floor, it was also facing a narrow alley. Not to mention opening the window for ventilation, he opened the window and smelled the stench from the sewer. Nanling walked through the corridor to the room he rented. Fortunately, the area was still 60 square meters as agreed. There was no public area operation, which comforted him a little. 60 square meters was a little small, and the only floor-to-ceiling window looked out to a narrow and dark alley, which was really bad. But it was cheap. And water and electricity were all free. Is there any better condition than this? And he didn't have any requirements for the living environment, so this was it. TSK, it's okay. A rather arrogant voice came from the side. Nanling turned her head indifferently, watching the head that changed into a young girl's hair and pretended to be uncrawling around the house, and couldn't help asking, "Are you going to live with me too?" Auntie Head said confidently, "Of course, I used all my savings to buy this head, just let me stay here for a while. Anyway, I only have one head, it won't take up much of your space. Don't worry, I will move out when my work is stable. After all, I also want to have a brand new body as soon as possible and find some men to enjoy." That's all she can do. Nanling doesn't mind Auntie Head going out to mess around. Anyway, she only has a brain left, so respect her personal hobbies. Anyway, just don't bring anyone back. Nanling pondered for a while, and suddenly asked with some doubts, "By the way, why don't you just find a partner in the virtual community? Anyway, there is not much difference between reality and virtuality for you, right?" Li Ji suddenly stopped talking, and her artificial face suddenly showed a complicated and lost expression. She sighed and said, "It seems to be true. After you said that, I feel that this kind of fun is suddenly boring. What else can I do?" She was confused. Nanling ignored her. This kind of confusion is actually a psychological problem unique to a certain stage after accepting human body transformation. It can be regarded as a disease. However, Nanling was not going to help her. She had to rely on herself to get out of this troublesome thing. After packing up his simple things, he chose to rest directly. Tomorrow morning, he had to report to the equipment maintenance department of Fenyuan Operation Company and receive equipment. It would be best if he could start working directly, so he did not practice today. However, the so-called rest is actually to let his body recuperate under the control of the wisdom core. His body is still weak now. Even key refining is mainly based on recuperation. He dare not break through the realm at will. Fortunately, after the wisdom core took over everything, his recovery speed was visible to the naked eye. Nanling sighed a little. The feeling that he was about to be taken over by the wisdom core came again. In order not to be taken over, now as long as the wisdom core operates his body, he will participate in the whole process and try to make his will keep up. He had an ambition in his heart, which was to completely abandon his intellectual core one day and let his own will take full control and do the same thing. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.